Chapter 50. Ding Ning's eyes were also dyed white by the pure white snowflakes. His opponent's attack just now had already broken 2 of his ribs and caused quite a bit of damage to his internal organs. He knew that even if he used his true cultivation from the start, he may not be able to kill this masked man in black, because the other was a rare seal master in Chongling. Also, the other had planned to end the battle quickly when he first attacked, so he used seals that consumed large amounts of vital energy. He could not resist the suppression of pure power. However, he was not an ordinary cultivator. His perception of certain presences, especially the ones he was familiar with, was much stronger than this seal master. The coldness and calmness on his face were true coldness and calmness, because he was indeed waiting for an opportunity to kill this symbol master at close range. And the chance was now. Just as these pure white snowflakes formed from the condensation of primal energies of the universe and floated above his head, their edges sharp but not sharp enough, a gray shadow silently floated down from the eaves next to the masked man in black. The masked man in black was controlling the snowflakes in front of him with his psyche power, but he was after all an expert who had been through killing for a long time. At this moment, he keenly felt the killing intent coming from behind him. Thinking that this was another unexpected accident, he let out a furious roar. A dagger that didn't reflect the slightest bit of light in the dark suddenly appeared in his left hand that had been hidden in his sleeve. He stabbed the dagger towards the gray figure that was charging at him from behind. Although it was a hasty response, the moment the sword stabbed out, a layer of powerful vital energy still surged from the black short sword. With a boom, a straight sword energy rushed out from the tip of the sword, fiercely piercing through the cold air. It was as if the short sword had turned into a thick and straight black spear. However, what the masked man hadn't expected was that the gray figure behind him didn't dodge at all. Instead, the gray figure used its entire chest to press down on the masked man's sword. At the same time, an extremely ruthless sword light slashed towards the back of the masked man's neck. This masked seal master would not normally fear this kind of vicious mutual destruction method, but he knew he could not easily die here. So he gave another angry howl. His vital energy surged under his feet, and he turned into a fallen leaf. In this extremely short time, he gently moved to the side and avoided the sneak attack from behind. Ding Ning was advancing rapidly. As the seal master stabbed with the sword in his left hand, his body charged straight forward. He did not breathe, just held his breath, and did his best to release all of his power in an instant. The heavy snowflakes were still suspended in the air, and the edges that were not sharp enough cut countless fine wounds on his face and hands. But his movements did not pause at all. Just as this masked and black-robed seal master floated a dozen feet away like a falling leaf, he was less than 10 feet away from this seal master. The masked seal master howled, and his body flashed towards the eaves on the side. At the same time, his mental power once again focused on the area between him and Ding Ning. He felt that he was losing control of this place. He did not care about the suicidal swordsman behind him. He only wanted to kill Ding Ning and leave. The pure white snowflakes shook again, and were about to turn into a terrifying snowstorm. In this moment, Ding Ning had already attacked. The shadow of the sword appeared in front of him. In the dark green flames, there seemed to be a white wildfire burning. He was still 10 feet away from the masked seal master, and the sword in his hand was only 2 feet long. With his present state, he could not touch the other. But in this moment, the masked seal master felt a sharp pain on his face, and he could not open his eyes. When the icy coldness seeped into his flesh, he immediately reacted. Ding Ning had used his sword to knock away many snowflakes that shot towards his face at an astounding speed. What was even more chilling and unbelievable was that in the moment he could not open his eyes, his mental power could not sense Ding Ning's existence. In his perception, there was only the swordsman charging madly from behind. All of Ding Ning's presence seemed to disappear into thin air. A scent of blood suddenly rose from under him. The seal master finally realized something. He forced his eyes open, and with a shout, the black dagger in his left hand sliced downwards. In his blurry vision, He saw the dark green remnant sword was slanting and stabbing into the inside of his right thigh. His black dagger once again gave off powerful sword energy. But it was too late. The coldness had reached deep into his bones. The dark green remnant sword quickly cut through several of his important blood vessels and then quickly withdrew, bringing with it a fountain of blood. The Seal Master's eyes were shocked. The black dagger in his hand turned and sliced towards Ding Ning's head. There was a deafening boom. Ding Ning's body flew backwards again. The black-clothed Symbol Master's eyes widened in disbelief. He could not believe that Ding Ning was still alive. He could not believe that Ding Ning could block his counterattack in this situation. At this time, the sword light of the gray shadow behind him had once again landed behind him. Because of the natural difference in cultivation, the black-robed Seal Master's right sleeve fiercely swung backwards. A wave of vital energy, along with dozens of pieces of seal snow that had not yet formed, charged towards the gray shadow behind him like a great wave. Pew! A muffled sound came first. The clothes at the chest of the gray shadow were all torn to pieces by the vital energy. Immediately after, more than 10 hissing sounds could be heard. Over 10 long and narrow holes appeared on the chest of this gray figure. Faintly, one could see that the white snow was rapidly melting. But this gray shadow was unspeakably valiant. Under such sobriety, he only let out a brazen grunt from his throat. The long sword in his hand was slightly off course and cut into the left shoulder of the masked Seal Master. The masked Seal Master's eyes suddenly changed. He howled like a beast at the end of its road. The black dagger in his left hand stabbed towards the gray shadow's heart. However, due to the dizziness caused by the large amount of blood loss in his thigh and the impact from his left shoulder, his dagger also deviated and stabbed into the gray shadow's shoulder. The gray shadow also howled. He raised the long sword in his hand again and slashed down repeatedly. 1 strike. 2 strikes. Puffs of blood unceasingly spurted out from the masked black-clothed Symbol Master's neck. The masked Seal Master fell to the ground, unable to stand. He was forced to his knees by the power of each strike. He raised the dagger in his left hand, the fingers of his right hand trembling. But both the dagger in his left hand and the vital energy in his right hand were still lacking and could not be used. Pew! Pew! When the 5th strike fell, he finally sat down dejectedly, his hands hanging down. The last consciousness in his mind was filled with regret and incomprehension. In tonight's plan, he should not have acted. But when he saw Ding Ning's performance and saw that these Jianghu men could not kill Ding Ning, he disobeyed orders. He thought he could definitely kill Ding Ning and leave quickly. But he had not thought that this was his end. He did not fear death, but when he thought of the terrible consequences his death would bring to his respected master, he was filled with regret. At the same time, what he could not understand at death's door was, how had Ding Ning been able to control his presence at that moment, and even the presence in his body had disappeared? What kind of cultivation technique was he practicing? The last few snowflakes that remained in the air suddenly collapsed and disappeared without a trace. The gray shadow did not stop. He once again fiercely chopped at the Talisman Master's shoulder and neck. The Talisman Master's vital essence had already completely collapsed, and this sword directly chopped off the Talisman Master's head, sending it flying diagonally. Seeing this scene, the gray shadow finally let go of the sword in his hand. He swayed and struggled to walk towards Ding Ning, who had fallen to the ground. Ding Ning looked at the gray shadow walking over. He suppressed the nauseous feeling of his organs being shaken. An indescribable grimace appeared at the corners of his mouth. This gray-robed swordsman was the person that Wang Taishu had sent him to White Goat Cave. He had not even asked for the name of the swordsman, but he had sensed that this swordsman was just Realm 2 second class. He had not expected that he and a gangster like this would be able to kill a Realm 3 first-class Seal Master in this alley. It was also at this moment that he sensed an unusually familiar aura approaching. Only now did he confirm that he was safe. Then, in the darkness, he silently shook his head in the direction of the presence. In his mind, he wanted to lean into Zhang Sun Qianshua's arms right now. He was very weak, tired, and cold right now. Yet he knew that if he wanted to survive in Chongling, it would be best if Zhang Sun Qianxue did not even enter this alley. He shook his head and glanced at the last flower remnant sword in his hand. He thought softly inside, fortunately, this was not the end yet. Then he looked up at the gray-robed swordsman who was struggling to walk over. He asked, "How are you? Why are you here?" His cultivation was low in Chongling, but the gray-robed swordsman, who had worked with Ding Ning to kill a cultivator skilled in seals, had joy in his eyes, but more shock and admiration. "I will not die." He took out 2 medicine pills from his sleeve and handed one to Ding Ning. Then he sat down next to Ding Ning and swallowed one himself. "Mr. Taishu had me pay attention to the vicinity of falling parasol and do my best to protect you and Miss Zhang Sun Qianxue." As the medicine entered his mouth, a thread of warmth rose in his chest. Ding Ning coughed softly. He knew that since this gray-robed swordsman had finally appeared, more people from 2-level tower would come to clean up the mess. He looked at the heavily wounded gray-robed swordsman and slowly said, "Wang Taishu is very loyal. I told him not to take care of me, but he still left you here, but this way, I owe you a favor and owe you a life." "Mr. is too polite." The gray-robed swordsman, who usually spoke little, said tiredly but sincerely in a soft voice, "You saved your own life. I know you are a genius, but I did not expect you to have such terrifying swordsmanship in just a few days of cultivation." "I have not asked for your name," Ding Ning said softly. "This one is Jing Mazong," the gray-robed swordsman answered. Ding Ning looked at him. "Such a unique name. Your name has the character Mo. You are from the Yuezhi?" The gray-robed swordsman nodded. "My parents are both horse slaves of the Yuezhi." The Yuezhi was a small border country outside of the Qin dynasty. At the same time, it was a tributary country to the Qin dynasty. Horse slaves were the slaves of nobility. As the descendants of horse slaves, they had freedom in Chongling and could use swords. Ding Ning knew that this had to do with Wang Taishu's favor. "You are very good with the sword. If you can live long in Chongling, you will definitely become a powerful swordsman." Ding Ning looked at him and said seriously. Jing Mazong stilled. He felt this was not possible, but he also felt that Ding Ning's tone contained a strange meaning. What are the origins of these people? He turned to look at Ding Ning, but Ding Ning's gaze was already on the corpse of the black-robed seal master. Chapter 51. Jing Mazong shook his head. The people of the streets had more connections and spies than the cultivators of the court. They needed to remember the people who made a living in the streets. But he was certain he had never seen these people before, whether it was this cultivator who was skilled in using seals to fight like the Yan dynasty cultivators, or the assassins with bamboo poles. These people looked like assassins who worked purely for money and had been mobilized from far away. There were too many surprises and suspicions for him tonight. Who wanted to kill Ding Ning? And they had spent so much effort to mobilize assassins from far away? He was also surprised by Ding Ning's strength and knowledge. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that Ding Ning possessed such swordsmanship. Also, the name he used in Chongling before was Zhou Sansheng that Wang Taishu had given him. When he had driven the carriage for Ding Ning knew his name. But just now, he had seriously asked for his name, and seemed to have sensed that he was from the Yuezhi. Had he been able to see the blade essence in his sword moves in the previous battle? Or had he been able to deduce that he was from the Yuezhi from the slightly unique healing pill medicines he had? Ding Ning did not pay attention to Jing Mazong's emotions. He thought for a moment, took a deep breath, and stood up. He glanced at the corpse of the black-robed seal master and said softly to Jing Mazong next to him, "These people, do not touch them. Before the Divinity Bureau or the other bureaus arrive, try to maintain everything here. Do not touch anything."
"Why?"
Jing Mazong looked even more bewildered at Ding Ning. He also stood up. "You are not even searching their bodies?" Ding Ning shook his head. "No need, even a minor person like me needs to be killed in such a manner. The mastermind is not an ordinary big fish. It is useless for us to investigate. Only the people of the court will find something useful. Tell Wang Taishu that if nothing else happens, it's best for 2-floor tower not to get involved in what happened here tonight." Ding Ning coughed softly and started to walk away. After taking a few steps forward, he could not help but turn his head slightly and add, "You'd better not let anyone find out that you're involved in this matter." Jing Mazong looked in shock at Ding Ning, who was calmly moving forward with difficulty. He remembered Ding Ning's words, but still could not understand. "Where are you going now?" he asked worriedly. Ding Ning gave an unusually simple answer, "Go home." "Go home? Who knows where your home is? I told you long ago that you left too quickly. If Wang Taishu hadn't left a suicidal sabresman of the Yuezhi here, I would have had to collect your corpse. How many days have you been in White Goat Cave, and you've already caused such trouble?" When the blood on his body was dried by the cold autumn wind, and he gently pushed open the door to the wine shop, cold and furious voices came from inside. Ding Ning closed the door to the wine shop and looked at Zhang Sun Qianxue shrouded in frost in the darkness. He said tiredly, "Today's matter is very strange." Zhang Sun Qianxue said coldly, "I do not care if it is strange or not. I only care about the result. I only know that there are countless grievances in Chongling. Everyone has grievances, even that Yuezhi person. Right now, it sounds like the Yuezhi is a vassal country protected by the Qin dynasty, but who does not know that before the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne, the Tiger Wolf army of the Qin dynasty killed 130,000 Yuezhi people in one battle? If you do not step into the world of cultivators, you may be far away from these people and their grievances. But if you come into contact with these people, you cannot escape from these grievances. The result is that I am still alive." Ding Ning sat down. Ignoring Zhang Sun Qianxue's increasingly cold gaze, he said softly, as though he did not hear Zhang Sun Qianxue's next words, "That masked cultivator pretended to be an assassin who was paid to kill for others, but I am certain he is a cultivator in the military. While he used some of the seal methods of the Yan dynasty cultivators, I am certain he is most skilled in the sword." Zhang Sun Qianxue sank into silence. Most of the time, she only cared about cultivation and was used to listening to Ding Ning's narration of what happened outside. At the last moment of his life, he only thought of using the sword and not seals. This exposed some of the things he wanted to hide. That person was very strong. He even had enough power to kill me and Jing Mazong. He was not someone who feared death, but he was not even willing to be wounded. Many times, he was in a hurry to leave. Especially after Jing Mazong appeared, what he wanted to do was not to kill me and Jing Mazong, but to kill me as quickly as possible and then flee. If he had not placed so many restrictions on himself from the start, we would not have been able to kill him so easily. Those cultivators who kill for money are true fugitives. They would not be like this. They would not worry about being discovered because they usually do not see the light of day. His behavior could only be because he has a special identity, and his master also has a special identity. So, even if he may have been transferred from another place, he and his master may be people in the Qin dynasty's military. If this matter is related to the previous backer of Jinlintang, and they use such a formation to deal with a weak cultivator like me who may affect 2-level tower, then what I am worried about now is whether Wang Taishu will live to see the sun tomorrow. Since this is the case, why did you not warn that Yuezhi person before? Zhang Sun Qianxue said coldly. Ding Ning looked at her and said seriously, because if it was as I thought, it was too late to warn him. Zhang Sun Qianxue looked at him and did not say anything. She just reached out coldly. There were 2 soft pops. Her fingers retracted from Ding Ning's waist. Ding Ning's 2 broken ribs accurately returned to their original positions. Maybe next time, you will not be so lucky. She looked at the bit of blood coming out of Ding Ning's mouth, and then at the last flower remnant sword hanging from Ding Ning's waist and sneered. Guanqiqi, Hifu, Guiyuhua, and that wine shop youth who entered profound understanding in half a day after joining White Goat Cave should be dead by now. In an ancient 2-story building, a similarly masked and black-robed cultivator looked with a pitiful gaze at Wang Taishu sitting across from him. He said with slight disdain, "You should know you are not a match for me. So, why did you not run when I walked into this building?" "Because this is 2-level tower, my home. In my home, even the strongest cultivator cannot easily kill me." Wang Taishu, pale and weak, looked at the masked cultivator who had killed more than a dozen guards and appeared in front of him. He said calmly, "I waited here for you to speak with you, and see what kind of person you are." The masked man in black mocked, "Is this the kind of weird mentality where even if you're going to die, you still want to die with some understanding? The other gangs in Chongling cannot invite someone like you. Also, to kill so many of my brothers in one night and use such a method to get rid of two-level tower, you need more powerful cultivators. It's even more impossible for those gangs to have such ability." Wang Taishu looked into the cultivator's eyes. "So the information I received back then was correct. There should be an important person in the military behind Jinlintang." This cultivator's eyebrows rose slightly. He did not admit or deny. In his eyes, Wang Taishu was a dead man. Yet Wang Taishu looked at him and said softly in a very sincere tone, "But have you ever thought, what if you cannot kill me? What if you cannot kill me, and you killed so many of my brothers in one night? I will not cherish two-level tower, and will fight you to the end at all costs. I will find out who you are." Wang Taishu's tone suddenly turned cold. He said slowly, "You will have brothers and family. I will not be merciful against them." The masked cultivator's expression suddenly changed. "So, I will not let you live past tonight." He made such a sound. A fist-sized green copper ball flew out of his sleeve with a terrifying burst of vital energy. The moment it flew out, the surface of this seemingly ordinary green copper ball had already lit up with countless dazzling golden rune lines. In the next moment, all of the golden seal script split apart. All of the bronze pieces burned fiercely and turned golden. In this study, a golden fire, lotus bloomed. There was a loud explosion. Countless burning metal lotus pieces surged towards Wang Taishu at an unimaginable speed. This is the face of two-level tower, the most important foundation. How can I let you easily kill me here? When the green copper ball flew out, Wang Taishu's expression also became strange, and he also let out a similar sound. The floor under his chair suddenly split apart. When the golden fire lotus bloomed, a thin faint green sword light flowed out of the masked man's pants like a silent stream of water. It flew close to the ground towards Wang Taishu. This masked man knew that these people of the Jianghu all had methods to escape. He had planned for there to be a secret escape path under Wang Taishu. If Wang Taishu really fell, he would be cut in half by the flying sword he had prepared. However, in the next moment, he roared in shock and anger. The floor under Wang Taishu's feet split apart. There was no secret passage that led underground as he had imagined, but an explosion. An explosion even stronger than the explosion of the green copper ball formed under Wang Taishu's feet. A stream of air like a volcanic eruption sent Wang Taishu flying through the roof. Amidst the furious roar of the masked man in black, countless golden flaming lotuses instantly tore apart the wall behind Wang Taishu's original position. At the same time, the power of the explosion caused the entire floor of the small building to collapse. His flying sword wavered in the explosion fragments and air currents, causing his mental power to suffer some damage. The masked man's body flew backwards. He raised his head and saw Wang Taishu's body was so tall that it exceeded the range of his mental power to control his flying sword. And just as he caught a glimpse, Wang Taishu opened his arms, and a pair of black wings seemed to grow out of his arms. It was a strange gliding robe hidden under the robe. Whoosh! In the next moment, there was a sharp sound of something breaking through the air. Wang Taishu's body was like a bat, quickly disappearing into the darkness of the night. The masked man was immediately soaked in cold sweat. Chapter 52. In a dark alley not far from the exploded building, under a persimmon tree, there was a black carriage quietly parked. The curtains of the black carriage were open. Inside the carriage sat a masked man dressed in black robes. Different. This masked man's hair was gray, and he was clearly much older than the other masked men in black robes. His forehead was smooth, but the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were so deep they seemed to have been carved by a knife. His eyes were truly ancient. Although most of his face was covered, Anyone who saw him would unconsciously think of the wind and frost beyond the Great Wall, the smoke in the desert, and the battlefields of the Canyong sun where vultures filled the sky. The moment the small building exploded, this ancient cultivator also saw Wang Taishu charge into the sky. Seeing Wang Taishu disappear into the night like a bat, the wrinkles at the corners of this ancient cultivator's eyes deepened. After Wang Taishu destroyed Jinlantang, the gangsters in Chongling all thought that Wang Taishu had soared into the sky. But this ancient cultivator knew that any low-level cultivator, no matter how high they flew, was still too low in the eyes of the truly powerful in Chongling. Even in their eyes, Wang Taishu was too weak. But if Wang Taishu could survive, they may not be able to survive after night. A layer of bitterness appeared in this ancient cultivator's eyes. He shook his head and put down the curtains. The carriage started to slowly move along the straight streets. In an alley near the eastern outskirts of Chongling, an ordinary carriage passed by this black carriage. The two didn't stop, but within that seemingly ordinary carriage, there was a grave and stern voice that carried an indescribable murderous aura that passed through the two curtains, entering this aged cultivator's ears. Within 3 days, Wang Taishu must die. If Wang Taishu does not die, you should know what to do. The ancient cultivator did not say anything. His eyes were narrowed as though he was asleep. But after the carriage left Chongling and started to enter the official road outside the city, he sighed softly. A general's success is built on 10,000 bones. It has been like this since ancient times. This night was very difficult for many people in Chongling to endure. Wang Taishu was like a bat that had fallen into an ordinary house. However, his bat was an injured one. The cultivator, who had killed a dozen of his guards in a few breaths and appeared in front of him, had thrown out a bronze ball that only the cultivators of the Chu dynasty were skilled in. Although he managed to escape by relying on his life-saving arrangement, he was still pierced by several burning golden talismans. At this time, his legs and abdomen had terrifying lacerations. In the most serious of them, his organs could be seen. But he, who had climbed up from the bottom of Chongling, had experienced moments like this many times. After being sick for a long time, he naturally knew how to treat his wounds. He quickly took off his tattered outer robe and the strange bat clothes with several tears. Naked in this cold autumn, he slowly used his vital energy to force out all of the metal fragments in his body. Only then did he take out 2 bottles of medicinal powder from his outer robe, applying it externally and ingesting it internally, quickly bandaging his wounds. The great pain and loss of blood from these wounds made his head dizzy. But he still realized that since he was facing a terrifying opponent of this level, then his other secret residences in Chongling were not safe and could not be used for concealment. He hesitated for a moment. Then he reached out with his hands that were no longer warm. Silently, he took a few pieces of clothing from the bamboo pole that was used to dry clothes and put them on. Under the cover of the night, he flipped over dozens of walls and finally entered a side room in the backyard of a restaurant. There was a slightly fat chef in this side room who was sleeping soundly. He clearly was not a cultivator. He only woke up when Wang Taishu walked in front of him and pushed his body several times. Yet the moment he saw Wang Taishu's pale face, this slightly fat chef seemed to welcome the most important mission of his life. A strange light flashed across his face. He bowed deeply to Wang Taishu with unusual respect and asked, "What do you need me to do?" Wang Taishu looked at him and said softly, "Help me gather some information. I must reach a truly safe place before dawn." Mo Qinggong was furious. No matter who it was, if they were called up after resting for less than an hour, they would be furious. Even more importantly, people like him did not have much time to rest each day. He rubbed his slightly pained head and casually threw a dossier that the young person in front of him carefully handed to him into the fire basin at the side. Do not spend effort investigating this person. Put all your effort into that cultivator who used seals and had his head cut off. Have the divine strategy team investigate as well. Investigate to the end. The handsome young person in front of him looked in shock at the tongues of fire licking up from the fire basin. He could not understand why the dossier he had worked so hard to create in the shortest amount of time had been casually burned. He also could not understand why the youth had stopped investigating. Official. He could not help but speak. Do not think that I am muddle-headed from lack of rest. But just as he spoke, Mo Qinggong interrupted him with a cold smile.
I know what you want to ask.
I did not have you investigate that wine shop youth not because I have any special opinions, but because I have investigated him twice before. Regardless of whether he joined White Goat Cave or not, whether he reached profound understanding in half a day, there are no problems with his origins. Investigating this is a waste of effort. However, this was done by Qin Huaishu before. You have just taken over his position, so it is understandable that you do not know. So this youth had entered the sights of the Divinity Bureau long ago, and from official Mo's tone, he seemed to be very familiar with this youth, and even had a deep understanding of him. This handsome young official from the Divinity Bureau had a slightly stiff expression. He hesitated but still could not help but say softly, "Sir is right. This subordinate will ask more people before doing things in the future, so that I will not waste my energy. But are we really going to have the Divinity Unit investigate?" Hearing the young official's words, Mo Qinggong's eyes were inexplicably cold. He stared at the young official of the Divinity Bureau and said coldly, "You hold an important position in the Qin dynasty, especially in the Divinity Bureau. You have to understand that taking care of your own people is always more important than dealing with outsiders." Looking at this young official who was even more nervous, but still did not understand, he sneered and said, "The Qin dynasty has reached this level. We do not fear a single cultivator or cultivation place. The Holy One and the two officials do not think that the cultivation records of a sect can have a fatal effect on the Qin dynasty. What they care about is our absolute loyalty and whether each official acts according to their orders. They do not wish to see the warhorse pulling the chariot of the Qin dynasty not follow its own footsteps. They care more about using public resources for their own personal use. We, the Divinity Bureau, take care of the internal matters of the dynasty and the matters of our own people. Since you have reached this position in the Divinity Bureau, since you know that the Divine Strategy Team is doing all they can to investigate the matter of Cloud Water Palace, since you feel that what happened in Chongling tonight may be related to private use of public resources, and so urgently reported to me, then why do you not go one step further and think clearly about your responsibilities?" The young official's cold sweat soaked his hair and dripped down his face. If you want to stay in Chongling for a long time, you have to stand on the Holy One's side. Morong Cheng's cultivation talent is much better than Qin Huaishu's. He is also more handsome than Qin Huaishu and pleasing to the eye. But his corpse may have rotted by now, while Qin Huaishu has been recommended to study at Lingshu Sword Gate. Mo Qinggong looked coldly at this young official who could not satisfy him. In the end, he said, "Qin Huaishu's strength is that he can see clearly and understand his position. I will not say what I said tonight a second time. I only hope that you can see more clearly in the future." "Official, thank you for the reminder." The young official bowed deeply and respectfully.
Go.
I'd like to know which noble's luck is so bad that he even failed to deal with these Jianghu characters. Mo Qinggong's expression softened slightly. He waved his hand to indicate that the young official could leave. As he was skilled in using people, he reminded, "Be careful and serious in your work, and use your strength where you need to use it. You should have heard that the people who sit in this position under me, if nothing unexpected happens, will fly to the top." Soaked in cold sweat, the young official's eyes burned. He bowed respectfully again, and then left, full of fighting spirit. At almost the same time, Li Lingjuan's mansion. Li Lingjun looked at his most important advisor Lu Sish and frowned deeply. He had an ordinary appearance, but because of his unique presence, everyone who saw him felt that he was the most beautiful man in the world. "We did not do it." Lu Sish looked calmly at Li Lingjun, who had not slept in the middle of the night, and said, "I definitely would not use such crude and dangerous methods." Li Lingjun nodded and said softly and elegantly, "If it was you, I think you would not show any traces. But I want to know, other than me, which noble in Chongling does not like him. Something like this has happened. Maybe that noble needs a friend?" Lu Sish smiled slightly. Nobles with some ambition will not refuse a friend like Juanshang. Li Lingjun suddenly became worried. He looked deeply at Lu Sish and said, "In the last few days, I have been considering a problem. Do you think I should request to see Jingxiu?" Lu Sish's expression changed dramatically, his hands unconsciously trembling. Because this Zheng Xiu that Li Lingjun spoke of had an even more noble name, Empress. Chapter 53. Don't. Lu Sish looked up at Li Lingjun and said in a most sincere tone, "Wait a little longer." Li Lingjun hesitated for a long time. He gathered his hair and nodded. He knew that Lu Sish was right. Even if that woman with unparalleled power would be interested in his thoughts, or had been waiting for him to make some requests, he knew that the woman who was usually revered by the people of Chongling and surrounded by all kinds of praise had a cold and decisive side that ordinary people could not match. If he made too many concessions, then even if he could return to the capital of the Chu dynasty separated by mountains and rivers, even if he could sit on the most exquisite throne in the world, the Chu dynasty would not be the original Chu dynasty. But how long could he wait? He turned his head and looked at the black night outside the window. He felt that each night in Chongling was so long, but there was not enough time. As he turned his head, Lu Sish's heart beat rapidly, and his breathing unconsciously stopped. He saw that Li Lingjun's hair was completely white. At the rooster's crow, a faint red light flashed on the platform in front of the small temple at the top of White Goat Cave. On the meditation mat in the small temple, Shui Wangshu slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Li Daoji, who was standing in the last darkness before dawn. He cleared his throat and asked softly, "Is that youth's recent cultivation smooth?" Li Daoji nodded coldly and said, "He is the cultivator who has the smoothest cultivation I have ever seen." A few days ago, his energy sank into the Jade Palace, and he reached Realm 1 second-class cultivation. His following cultivation was not troubled at all. The obstacles and barriers that cultivators encounter do not seem to exist in front of him. A hint of excitement appeared in Shui Wangshu's calm eyes. He looked at Li Daoji and asked seriously, "You feel that he can reach Realm 2 before the Sword Trial Festival?" "That will depend on the speed of his breakthrough. After all, breaking through a major realm is completely different from the usual obstacles in cultivation. If there aren't many obstacles in his breakthrough, then he should be a monster who can break through to the Qi refinement realm in just a month." Li Daoji said in detail, and then said in a slightly cold tone, "But just this night, he was almost killed." Shui Wangshu stilled. He had thought that Li Daoji had appeared in front of him so early to discuss Ding Ning's cultivation with him. Li Daoji looked coldly at Shui Wangshu. Before Shui Wangshu could speak, he continued, "I do not know who it was, but the leader was a vital energy realm cultivator with many seals. The Divinity Bureau is investigating this matter." Shui Wangshu frowned, but he still didn't say anything. Li Daoji looked at him and said, "Ding Ning broke 2 ribs and was slightly wounded. But he did not disappoint. He and an energy refinement realm gangster were able to kill that vital energy realm cultivator." Shui Wangshu's brows relaxed, his eyes filled with an unusual light. He praised softly, "This youth really brings honor to White Goat Cave." This time, it was Li Daoji's turn to frown. In his view, this was not something to be happy about no matter how he looked at it. The unusual light in Shui Wangshu's eyes continued to grow. His wrinkled old face started to shine with an unusual light. He thought for a moment, then stood up. "Stay here today. Don't go anywhere." He seemed to be in a good mood as he smiled at Li Daoji and said. Li Daoji's breathing stopped.
He seemed to sense something.
He looked up at Shui Wangshu and slowly said, "Since the Divinity Bureau has intervened, Ding Ning will naturally return safely to the mountain. You do not have to go out." "That is not the same." Shui Wangshu shook his head. His usually indifferent eyes were filled with a rare pride. This expression was similar to the one Du Qingjiao had when he left White Goat Cave. "In these years, there have been very few things in White Goat Cave that can make me happy and proud. I finally got a student in profound understanding in half a day and may reach energy refinement in a month. Also, my senior sect brother left him for me when he left. Last night he was almost killed. Of course I know the Divinity Bureau will let him return safely to White Goat Cave. But I have not left White Goat Cave for a long time. If I don't go out, even if I am alive, other people will think I am dead. Do you know what kind of people are the most terrifying in the world? Not those who do not fear death, but those who will die quickly and do not have to worry about dying. I am too old. So old I will die. But in the end, I still have to remind people of this. Shui Wangxi's voice was still echoing in the small Taoist temple, but his figure had disappeared. He disappeared in front of Li Daoji, into the white clouds above the temple. When the first ray of light shone into falling parasol, Ding Ning woke up as usual. He coughed softly. The pain of 2 broken ribs was nothing to him, but under the intense exertion, the soreness he had not felt for a long time made him feel uncomfortable. Zhang Sun Qianxue sat by the window as usual and combed her long hair. White Goat Cave's carriage is outside the door. She did not turn around and said coldly, however, there is one more person in the carriage. The carriage driver did not detect it. This should be a Realm 5 cultivator, but wounded. It should be Wang Taishu. Ding Ning knew that her perception would not be a problem at this distance. His eyes were filled with joy. Today is special. I will return to White Goat Cave early and cannot make porridge for you, he said apologetically to Zhang Sun Qianxue as he quickly washed up. Zhang Sun Qianxue was silent. She wanted to retort, but she faintly felt that her cultivation in these years in this shabby alley had exceeded her expectations. She had even gotten used to what Ding Ning did for her. Just like now, when he told her that he couldn't cook porridge for her for a few breaths of time, she wasn't thinking that it was okay to skip a meal. Instead, she was thinking about what she should go out and buy to eat if she didn't have any porridge to eat. Maybe buy a bowl of noodles like he usually ate? In front of the carriage parked outside the wine shop, a middle-aged carriage driver with an honest face waited anxiously. He knew what had happened last night and knew that Ding Ning was seriously wounded. But based on his understanding of Ding Ning after taking him in daily trips for the last half of the month, he knew that even if Ding Ning could not return to White Goat Cave today, he would notify him. Seeing the door of the wine shop open and Ding Ning's inexplicably pale face, the carriage driver immediately showed joy on his face. At the same time, guilt appeared in his eyes. How are your wounds? Are you returning to White Goat Cave today? I am. Even in healing, White Goat Cave is better than the doctors in the neighborhood. Yesterday, I was negligent later. An official came to investigate my carriage. The axle had been cut by a sharp weapon after entering Chongling. Someone must have done something to the road. But you are a student of White Goat Cave. Not to mention the teachers of White Goat Cave, even the officials of the bureaus will treat you differently. I really did not think that someone would act against you. This was an accident. Also, you are not a cultivator. If you found out early, you may have lost your life. After conversing with the carriage driver, Ding Ning nimbly lifted a corner of the curtain when the carriage driver turned to rein in his horse and then flashed in. Looking at the figure curled up silently on the couch, Ding Ning first made a gesture for silence. Then he coughed softly and said to the carriage driver outside, "Today, I fear it will be more urgent than usual. If the carriage is still okay, please hurry." The carriage driver, who usually received favors from White Goat Cave, thought that Ding Ning was in a hurry to return to White Goat Cave to be healed. He said simply, "I have put more cushions and bedding inside. You have to be careful when the carriage is bumpy." After responding, the carriage driver cracked his whip, and the carriage started to gallop. Under the cover of the rapid hooves and rolling wheels, Ding Ning looked at Wang Taishu, who was curled up next to him with a pale face. Even his body seemed to have shrunk. He said softly, "So miserable you have to hide in this White Goat Cave carriage." Wang Taishu looked powerlessly at Ding Ning, who seemed to have detected him hiding in the carriage. He squeezed out a pale smile. "Very miserable. The brothers who fought with me, those who could support 2-level tower after my death, all died last night. In order to get information, in order to get on your carriage, 2 more died for me. I have to admit that you gave me the greatest surprise again. You and I were the only survivors of the assassination last night." Hearing these words, Ding Ning was not shocked. He thought for a moment and said softly, "It seems that the military noble behind Jinlintang is not satisfied. If we can survive these few days, I will make him pay the price for his unwillingness," Wang Taishu said softly, suppressing his cough. Ding Ning shook his head. He did not answer Wang Taishu's words and muttered, "White Goat Cave will not ignore me, right? At least Li Daoji should come out and receive me." The speeding carriage was already on the official road on the outskirts of Chongling. Theoretically, on such a wide road, the carriage should move faster. But sitting in the carriage, Ding Ning and Wang Taishu could sense that the carriage had slowed down. More than a dozen chariots flashing with cold bronze light took up most of the road ahead. Dozens of soldiers in scale armor were inspecting the people and carriages passing by. Ding Ning lifted a corner of the curtain and saw the cold light of the scales and weapons of the soldiers. Chapter 54. It is the Chongling Gate Guards. It seems to be a routine inspection. If it is just a routine inspection, this carriage belongs to White Goat Cave. Since it is carrying me, it should be easy to pass. As long as it's not someone related to that noble in the army, even if they find out that I'm in your carriage, there won't be a problem. At most, they'll just know that I'm in this carriage. After all, I'm not a criminal to be arrested. But if it is someone related to that important person in the military, they may try to kill you directly. Then I can only do my best to steal a horse and flee." Ding Ning and Wang Taishu conversed softly. While this appeared to be a routine inspection by the Chongling guards, the inspection at this time should be related to the assassination last night. Next to the dozen or so bronze chariots flashing with cold light, a soldier also dressed in scale armor stood silently. The only difference between him and the other soldiers was that he had a black sheathless iron sword hanging from his waist. The runes on this iron sword that were as dense as flowers, as well as the faint layer of fluorescence on his face, naturally revealed his identity as a cultivator that was completely different from ordinary soldiers. He appeared to be paying attention to the surrounding people and carriages, but in reality, his gaze was constantly flitting across the distant road. When Ding Ning's carriage appeared in his sight, his eyes lit up slightly. As the carriage came closer, and he saw the marks left behind by the carriage wheels on the ground and the jolts of the carriage, the light in his eyes grew brighter, like a strange fire was burning. Looking at the slowing carriage, he called over the two soldiers next to him and said a few words. The dozen or so carriages at the front were driven to the sides of the road to make a wide path for White Goat Cave's carriage. The middle-aged man driving the carriage was pleasantly surprised. He thought that these soldiers had seen the small white goat symbol on the carriage and were letting them pass. However, what he never expected was that when he brandished his whip, before the carriage that was gradually slowing down could even speed up, the dozens of scaled armored soldiers already temporarily stopped their inspection of the other carriages and pedestrians, quickly surrounding them. "Your table manners are unsightly. It seems you may die here today." Seeing the actions of these soldiers through the cracks in the curtain, Wang Taishu sighed softly and said sincerely to Ding Ning, "If I attack later, do not follow. As long as these people show any signs of wanting to kill you in broad daylight, I will not stand with you." Ding Ning nodded and said sincerely, "I may not bury you, but I will think of a way to get revenge for you." Wang Taishu laughed. He tried his best to hold back his coughs. It was very difficult to laugh. "What are you doing?" The middle-aged man driving the carriage looked at the approaching military cultivator and said angrily, "This is a carriage of White Goat Cave." The military cultivator with the black sword at his waist was expressionless as he continued to walk forward. He said coldly, "The carriages of White Goat Cave will also be inspected." "That may not be the case." This simple carriage driver, who usually did not care for etiquette, sneered. He took out a document with a bright red seal from his sleeve. "This is an official document from the Divinity Bureau. To prevent accidents, there are no obstructions." In the carriage, Ding Ning and Wang Taishu stilled. The two of them had not expected such a change. The bureaus of the Qin dynasty all had special documents. These documents were used in emergency situations to coordinate the people of the bureaus. The document this carriage driver took out was a special document from the Divinity Bureau. Because the Divinity Bureau was in a rush to transport prisoners or witnesses, there was a special document that didn't require inspection at the checkpoints along the way. Based on this carriage driver's usual behavior, he definitely would not have thought of asking the Divinity Bureau for a document like this. The Divinity Bureau probably did not want anything to happen to Ding Ning after last night's incident, so the officials took special care of him. Yet facing such a change, this military cultivator with the black sword at his waist was still cold and indifferent. This document is invalid. Why is it invalid? The carriage driver opened his mouth in disbelief. But before he could speak, a cold voice sounded from the side of the road. A bald man who looked like an ordinary merchant raised his head slightly to look at this military cultivator who was half a head taller than him. His expression was even colder than this military cultivator's. After speaking, his right hand reached forward from his waist, and a black jade token hung in his hand. The aura of this jade token was also very cold. The 3 words, Divinity Bureau, on it revealed the identity of this bald man disguised as an ordinary merchant. The Divinity Bureau was undoubtedly one of the most feared places in Chongling. So when this jade token was exposed to the morning sun, even the unrelated passers-by felt a chill. But facing the threatening gaze of this Divinity Bureau official, the expression of this military cultivator with a black sword did not change. He said coldly, "Because I am Duan Jiqiu, commander of the Qi Gate Army, awarded the rank of Baihu." The plain-clothed official of the Divinity Bureau froze, his expression turning extremely ugly. The Qin dynasty's military titles were divided into 20 levels. Those above level 8 had many privileges and could enjoy the tax of 100 households. This was a reward that only level 9 officials could enjoy. Adding on that, the other was a commander of the Qimen army in charge of the complex defenses of Chongling. He had enough power to not be restricted by the Divinity Bureau. The people inside come out. This commander Duan Jiqiu did not look at this Divinity Bureau official. His cold gaze landed on the carriage. At this moment, a faintly discernible aura seeped out from his body. Feeling this aura, Wang Taishu, who was in the carriage, suddenly turned pale. Ding Ning's heart sank. His perception was much stronger than Wang Taishu's. Also, Duan Jiqiu had purposefully displayed this vital energy presence. So, he was certain that this commander was a military expert in Realm 5 cultivation. With Wang Taishu's current injuries, and with so many soldiers glaring at him like tigers watching their prey, if they were to fight, it would be impossible for him to escape from the hands of such a military expert. I want to see who can make the people of White Goat Cave come out. With Commander Duan Jiqiu's light shout, even the chariot stopped by the road was slowly pulled. It looked like no one could stop him from letting Ding Ning and Wang Taishu appear in the morning sun. Yet at this time, a calm and old voice came from the path behind him. Everyone present involuntarily turned their heads to look, only to see an old man with white hair and a white beard walking over from the path. This old man's face was like white jade, but his lips were vermilion red. His white Taoist robe was bordered with yellow, and there was a small white jade sword at his waist that looked like a decoration. He looked ethereal, but perhaps because he had rushed, he was panting slightly. When this old man spoke, Ding Ning's eyes lit up. He lifted the curtain a crack and saw this old man from a distance. He muttered softly, "Why does he look older than Du Qingjiao? So old. Not just old, he doesn't even have a temper. Can he still do it?" Wang Taishu's brow was still furrowed. He also saw the old man through the crack. Seeing the small white jade sword, he guessed who this person was. He was shocked but still nervous. Because the old man was very far from their carriage, this old man had to walk and be fast enough. Duan Jiqiu's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do not think to act before I act. You will not make it in time." The white-haired old man looked at him and said. Duan Jiqiu sneered. "You must be the cave master of White Goat Cave, Shui Wangshu. But even the cave master of White Goat Cave does not qualify to interfere in my investigation." This white-haired old man was Shui Wangshu, who usually sat in the highest temple of White Goat Cave. Looking at Duan Jichio's cold smile, he smiled slightly and said, "At this time, I do not speak of qualifications, only strength." Duan Jichio's gaze suddenly turned cold. His lips moved slightly as he prepared to speak. Xue Wangshu spoke first. "My past contributions are much greater than your present contributions. Now that White Goat Cave belongs to the Green Vine Sword Academy, I have nothing to worry about. Based on my contributions, even if I slowly whittle them down, I can do more of these things. Moreover, you guys are probably desperate enough to jump over the wall. Don't tell me you guys would do something so unsightly?" Although his tone was as calm as Ding Ning's, as if there was no anger in it, his words were indescribably domineering. The pride in his eyes caused the corners of Duan Jichio's mouth to twitch uncontrollably. Duan Jichio's gaze flashed violently. Then he looked coldly at Xue Wangshu and said, "All right, then let's see what strength you have to say such words." Xue Wangshu still smiled without any anger. He even turned his body slightly. He did not look at this military cultivator who was giving off terrifying murderousness, but at the mountain further behind North General Mountain where White Goat Cave was. In the morning light, the distant peaks behind Beijiang Mountain were like the faintest brush strokes in an ink painting. They were faintly beautiful, but also seemed unreal. "Watch me move that mountain over." At this moment, Xue Wangshu said something that many people couldn't understand. However, the moment he said these words, the faint mountain peak he was looking at suddenly became clear. Duan Jichio's face suddenly turned snowy white, and his body uncontrollably trembled. At this time, there was a muffled boom in the sky above. There seemed to be another mountain. Chapter 55. Many people present panicked and did not know what had happened. They did not understand why the faint mountain range in the distance had suddenly become clear. But both Duan Jichio and the bald Divinity Bureau official knew what had happened. This was the mountain-moving realm. Only when all the primal energies of the universe in the distance were sucked in and moved over would the faint mountain in the distance become clear. Only when such a terrifying amount of primal energies of the universe was sucked in would an invisible mountain suddenly appear above everyone's heads. Amidst the panic, Xue Wangshu grasped the small white jade sword at his side in satisfaction. The invisible mountain that was pressing down on everyone's head suddenly disappeared. However, an even more majestic power was emitted from the small white jade sword that seemed to be a decoration. It was close to the ground as it curled upwards. Pew 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 pew, Duan Jichio gave a low shout. His metal clothing shook off the dust accumulated over the years. He could not suppress it and floated up until his feet were a foot off the ground.
Hum.
All the chariots parked at the side seemed to sense a fatal danger and gave off violent vibrations. All the Taotai seal scripts on the chariots lit up and gave off blinding light. Numerous greedy and bloodthirsty ferocious beasts with a fierce aura seemed to be about to rush out from the surface of the war chariot in the next moment and devour people. However, what was even more shocking was that these heavy formation chariots that required 4 war horses to pull were also lifted into the air by a surging force in the next moment. They flew higher and higher, and very quickly, they far surpassed the height of the pavilion by the side of the road. This was an indescribable scene. The heavy seal chariots were thrown into the air. The vicious beasts on the chariots were powerless to resist. Even the armored soldiers were shocked speechless. But seeing this scene, the Divinity Bureau officials suddenly reacted and exclaimed, "Don't." It was not easy to create seal chariots. Each chariot was the work of countless craftsmen and was a valuable treasure of the Qin dynasty. According to the laws of the Qin dynasty, if a cultivator deliberately damaged a seal chariot, they would be executed. However, his worries seemed to be unfounded. There was a soft sound. All the strangeness in the air suddenly disappeared. Pew pew, Duan Jichio's body landed on the ground, and 2 more plumes of dust came out from under his feet. All the heavy seal chariots were pulled by a gentle power and silently landed on the ground. The beasts formed by the patterns of light on the surface of the seal chariots quickly disappeared in fear. Xue Wangshu put away the small white jade sword that looked like a decoration and glanced proudly at the pale Duan Jichio. Gasp sounded. At this time, everyone found that the white goat cave carriage that had been behind Duan Jiqiu had been swept onto the path behind Shui Wangshu. Shui Wangshu glanced at Duan Jiqiu, who was still trembling, and shook his head. He did not even have the interest to say another word. His body flew up like a weightless white cloud, flying back to the front of the carriage. He sat down beside the driver and said indifferently, "Return to the mountain." The mountain in the distance. No one dared to stop this carriage. In an ordinary courtyard in the eastern suburbs of Chongling, the cultivator who had sighed about the vicissitudes of life last night sat on a bamboo chair under a wintersweet tree in the courtyard. He was not masked at this time. His cheeks were as smooth as his forehead, but the stubble on his chin was covered in white frost and added to the feeling of having weathered many storms. A falcon with withered feathers but indescribably vigorous strength swooped down rapidly from the sky and landed directly on his outstretched arm. He pulled out a small scroll from a thin hollow tube tied to the eagle's leg. The moment he saw the contents of the scroll, he let out a deep sigh. He closed his distressed eyes, leaning against the ice-cold bamboo chair. Many scenes flashed through his mind. Among them, there was the headless talisman master's corpse kneeling in the dark alley, Wang Taishu who had soared into the sky and disappeared in a flash, the fat chef who had committed suicide by taking poison behind a small restaurant, and the invisible mountain that had fallen down from the official road in the distance. Of all the battles he had experienced in the past, this seemed to be the battle he had the most confidence in. Yet who would have thought that the usually strong and cautious expert who cultivated both sword and seal would die at the hands of a youth who was still wet behind the ears? Who would have thought that so many people would rather die to cut off the clues and help Wang Taishu hide his tracks? Who would have thought that the most mediocre and unremarkable sect master of a small sect that most people in Chongling had forgotten was a mountain-moving realm grandmaster? A youth who had cultivated for less than a month had such power. An ordinary gangster in Chongling had so many death warriors. An old man in mountain-moving realm had come out of the mountain at this time, so this battle was not an unjust loss. It was a pity that in previous battles, there might have been a chance to turn things around if they lost. But this battle was lost, and the result was set. To deal with a cultivator above Realm 6, they had to use multiple Realm 6 great cultivators, and even Realm 7 cultivators. And to deal with Realm 7, they had to use Realm 7 cultivators. There were not as many places as places. There were very few cultivators in the world compared to ordinary martial artists, but there were many cultivators in Chongling. However, cultivators under Realm 5 were easy to find, but Realm 6 was a dividing line. So when Shui Wangshu showed Realm 7 power, there was no difference between 1 day and 3 days. This ancient cultivator closed his eyes forever with a worried expression. His vital energy passed through his body like a storm and destroyed all of his vitality. A strand of bright red blood seeped out from his mouth and sprinkled on the front of his clothes, as if several poignant roses had bloomed. It was a bit strenuous for the carriage carrying for people to run on the mountain path. Inside the carriage, Wang Taishu sat up straight and bowed seriously to Shui Wangshu, who was sitting at the front of the carriage. Many thanks to Cave Master Shui for saving my life. If you want to thank, do not thank me. Shui Wangshu had been examining Ding Ning with a satisfied gaze. Ding Ning was also examining him with a satisfied gaze. Hearing Wang Taishu's thanks, he reached out and pointed at Ding Ning. If you want to thank your subordinate and him. If he had not reached profound understanding in half a day, and did such a thing last night that made me proud, I would not have come out of the mountain today. Wang Taishu said respectfully, it is all the same. There are many sentimental people in the marketplace. You people are more affectionate than those in court. Shui Wangshu looked calmly at Wang Taishu and said slowly, but I still want to give you a piece of advice. Where it is possible to make mistakes, you should forgive them. You have to know your limits. The nobles in the court will probably give you an explanation for your brothers who died last night. But if the way you deal with it doesn't satisfy them and implicates some people who shouldn't be implicated, then you and more people will be implicated. Wang Taishu's expression turned solemn. He nodded and said, this junior understands. You're really good. Shui Wangshu's gaze once again stopped on Ding Ning. Satisfaction was written all over his face, but he could not help but praise. I am very satisfied. Ding Ning smiled respectfully and peacefully. I am also very satisfied with you. Shui Wangxi smiled and said, I am satisfied with you, not just because of your cultivation progress, but also because of your attitude when dealing with these Jianghu people. I prefer cultivators with human feelings, and do not like cultivators who can cut off their emotions and desires for the sake of cultivation progress. Ding Ning looked at him and said, I am not satisfied with you because you are so strong, but because I had thought that sect Uncle Li Daoji might come, and had not expected you to come personally. Shui Wangxiu did not disguise his satisfaction as he looked at Ding Ning and said, Your wounds do not seem light, but there are not many days until the sword trial festival of the Green Vine Sword Academy. Ding Ning nodded. So give me some good medicine, otherwise I may not be able to last until the end and take back that spirit vein. Shui Wangxiu laughed. He laughed loudly, and his laughter echoed in the forest on both sides. You have some connections with my senior sect brother. You can stay for a few days in the back mountains of White Goat Cave. Then he looked at Wang Taishu and said coolly. Wang Taishu once again gave his thanks. The golden light of dawn fell on the carriage and gilded it gold. Ding Ning narrowed his eyes. He leaned against the cushion and could not help but ask Wang Taishu softly, Sometimes, do you feel that it is very boring to kill each other like this? Wang Taishu nodded. It is very boring, but everyone has a scale in their heart. If this scale is not balanced, people will not live happily. Ding Ning said softly, Is this the so-called people live by their breath, trees live by their bark? Chapter 56. Shui Wangxiu has reached the mountain-moving realm? In the deepest hall of the Green Vine Sword Academy filled with sword marks, Di Qingmei's hands trembled uncontrollably. Half of the tea in his hand spilled before it reached his mouth. For the sect master of a sect, this was a great loss of composure. Sitting across from him, the direct disciple Duanmu Lian had an ugly expression. No wonder he is so fearless in doing some things. No wonder Du Qingjiao was able to retire after disobeying the empress. Di Qingmei's lips trembled, and he lost all of his usual dignity. He could not control his emotions at all. Usually, he called Shui Wangxiu and Du Qingjiao old fools. He had always thought that his cultivation was much higher than Shui Wangxiu and Du Qingjiao. Yet he had never thought that Shui Wangxiu had reached Realm 7. He himself had reached Realm 6 First Class 9 years ago, but after 9 years, he still could not touch the threshold of Realm 7. Today, he felt the primal energies of the universe in the mountains around the Green Vine Sword Academy vibrate violently. Shui Wangxiu purposefully gathered primal energies of the universe from him. This was a kind of reminder, but also a kind of threat. Shui Wangxiu was threatening him to not go too far in the upcoming sword trial festival and other matters of the sect. Even more importantly, he could not ignore Shui Wangxiu's threat. Because cultivation was cultivation. Even if there was just one breakthrough, it was still the difference between heaven and earth. If Shui Wangxiu was willing, Shui Wangxiu could humiliate him in front of the disciples of the Green Vine Sword Academy and White Goat Cave. You cannot be appeased. You want fairness. So, I gave you fairness in the Sword Trial Festival. But you think that if I give you fairness, the disciples of White Goat Cave can win? Di Qingmei took a deep breath. The vital essence in his body was still agitated, shattering the teacup in his hand. Many other residences in the Green Vine Sword Academy were also in an uproar. When Shui Wangxiu publicly displayed his cultivation on the official path, the news quickly spread to every corner of Chongling and even to the distant dynasties. In reality, if another sect suddenly had a cultivator like this, all the students of Green Vine Sword Academy would feel excited. But now that White Goat Cave had just merged into Green Vine Sword Academy, Shui Wangxiu's sudden display of strength caused all the students of Green Vine Sword Academy to feel inexplicably threatened. After all, they knew that their Dean Di Qingmei was only a Realm 6 first-class cultivator. In this world, only lions could control jackals and wolves. How could there be jackals and wolves controlling lions? If a Realm 7 cultivator was a lion in its prime, then a Realm 6 first-class cultivator was at most a lone wolf. A cold youth dressed in a thin blue robe, his figure unusually well-proportioned, and even his facial muscles did not seem to have any excess fat, was the exception among the students of Green Vine Sword School. He woke up at the Rooster Crows and first drank large amounts of warm spring water to wash his stomach. Then he counted the portions and ate simple grains and vegetables that had been boiled in the spring water. Then he started to forge the sword for 2 hours, read books for 2 hours, and then enter meditation to cultivate. This youth, about the same age as Nangong Kaishu, strictly followed his own cultivation plan. He was not affected by the news of the outside world and did not waste any time. His name was He Zhaoxi. His father had given him this name in hopes that he would not pay attention to meaningless matters and only seize the day. In Green Vine Sword Academy, Nangong Kaishu was an exception. She was not worried because of Xue Wangshu's display of strength. She was worried about Ding Ning's cultivation progress. There were only a few more days until the Sword Trial Festival. Could Ding Ning reach Energy Refinement Realm like he said? So she could not help but pick up her brush and anxiously write a letter to urge her father. The pill medicine matter I mentioned last time. What happened? In the grass hut of White Goat Cave, Ding Ning sat cross-legged on a meditation mat filled with spirit energy. Xue Wangshu was really willing to pay this time. The medicine he had given him was the rare Dragon Tiger Great Reversion Pill. The thick medicinal energy was growing in his body. He did not even need to use the 9-death silkworm. When the Sword Trial Festival started, his wounds would mostly heal. Before closing his eyes, his gaze once again landed on the last flower remnant sword in front of his knees. Sometimes, killing for revenge seemed very boring. Those who died could not come back to life, and maybe more people would die. Yet Wang Taishu was right. If one did not enjoy living, then there was no meaning in living. In his mind, Zhang Sun Qianshua's figure appeared again. He thought of the fairness she spoke of. The fairness in a person's heart was not the same as the so-called fairness of the world. This sword is in my hand now, but maybe it will become yours. Under a waterfall not far from Green Vine Sword Academy, Li Lingjuan's most important advisor, Lu Sish, looked calmly at a youth dressed in the uniform of Green Vine Sword Academy and said in a seductive tone. This youth was clearly a student who had enrolled several years earlier than Nangong Kaishu. He had a faint whisker around his lips, and his Adam's apple was obvious. His hands had calluses from rubbing against the hilt of his sword. This young man had a square face and looked rather calm. However, his eyes were filled with shock and unconcealable desire. He had been staring at Lu Sish's right hand the entire time. That was a small silver white sword. It was only a foot long, a foot shorter than Ding Ning's last flower remnant sword. Yet its short blade was covered in fine seal scripts. At this time, Lu Sish had not channeled any vital energy into the sword, but many of the seal scripts on the blade were shining on their own. They looked like dandelion seeds dancing in the air. This was the snow dandelion sword from the hands of the Chu dynasty's famed teacher, Ji Tianxue. The unique material and seal scripts not only allowed this sword to become a container for the mental power of cultivators, it could also be used as a flying sword by cultivators after Realm 5. The sword itself also contained unique power. There were very few forging materials in the world that had their own power. Only some forging sects of the Chu dynasty knew how to use such materials to forge all kinds of seal weapons and talismans. The Chu dynasty had dominated for hundreds of years. Its unique forging methods and all kinds of powerful seal weapons were its unique foundation. This snow dandelion sword was a famed sword even in the Chu dynasty. But no matter how stupid this Green Vine Sword Academy student was, he knew that he had to pay a great price to obtain a sword like this. So he took a deep breath and tried to appear calmer. He asked, "You represent Li Lingjun. Now you say that this sword may belong to me. What does Li Lingjun want me to do?" Mo Chun, I have carefully investigated your background. While you come from the Mo family of City, like the nobles of the Missouri estate, and your cultivation talent is not bad, your branch has been at odds with the nobles of the Missouri estate in your grandfather's generation. Now, their branch has been made marquises, but you are still in city, growing poorer by the day. Also, when you came to Chongling to study, you received special care. Some people who want to curry favor with the Missouri estate deliberately made things difficult for you. In the end, you finally managed to enter the Green Vine Sword Academy. If you do not have any fortuitous encounters, I fear that you will not stand out in the Green Vine Sword Academy and will not be successful. Lu Sish looked deeply at this Green Vine Sword Academy student called Mo Chun. I have found you on behalf of Li Lingjun because I want this sword in exchange for your promise. Li Lingjun wants you to become his retainer in the future. Mo Chun said dazedly. Just that? He was filled with disbelief. For him, even if there were no benefits, it was an honor to be a student of Li Lingjun after leaving the Green Vine Sword Academy. With this sword, you should be able to enter the top 3 of the Sword Trial Festival. Lu Sish looked at him and said softly, Li Lingjun does not like that youth from White Goat Cave who reached profound understanding in half a day, so he hopes that you will not let him enter the top 3. Mo Chen's body shook and he exclaimed, he wants me to use this sword to participate in the Sword Trial Festival. Do you feel that this is unfair to others? Lu Sish said with a cold smile, according to my understanding, the Green Vine Sword Academy's Sword Trial Festival does not limit what kind of sword can be used. But other people cannot get such a good sword. You have the ability to possess such a sword. What is unfair about that? Also, how can there be fairness in this world? Mo Chen's heart beat violently, and his lips trembled. He was very nervous, and his body uncontrollably heated up. He thought that with this sword, if he won the Sword Trial Festival, he could win the chance to cultivate with a spirit vein and obtain the green suet jade that would be beneficial to his future cultivation. With all of this, he would not be like he was now, unable to shine in the Green Vine Sword Academy. Should I kill him in the Sword Trial Festival? He looked up and asked Lu Sish, his forehead covered in sweat. As long as there are other solutions, never think of using such a simple, crude, but dangerous and stupid method. Lu Sish shook his head. To turn a genius into a mediocre person, as long as he does not have enough time to cultivate, as long as he is injured, as long as he does not have the conditions to increase his cultivation, as long as he is not a true monster that reaches vital energy realm in a few months, why should Li Lingjun look at him differently in the future? Mo Chun feared that if he lost this opportunity, it would not come again. He nodded hard, cold sweat rolling down his back. He was shocked at the loftiness of these important people. At the same time, Lu Sish's words caused him to faintly feel, were the rumors true? That new disciple of White Goat Cave could reach Realm 2 in a month. Chapter 57. The yellow leaves had all fallen, and the blinding but not warm sunlight shone on the stone path of the inner palace of Chongling. A man in yellow official robes embroidered with serpents slowly walked through the stone path towards the study at the end of the path. This man appeared to be in his 30s. His skin was smooth and gave off a yellow jade-like glow. His forehead was wide, and his lips were thick. He looked exceptionally determined. His figure was very ordinary, but he gave off a strange feeling of power. As he walked slowly, he gave people the feeling that his arms and legs were as hard as iron. On the 2 sides of the stone path were many powerful copper puppets that could move at any time. In the study at the end was the Empress of the Qin dynasty, the woman with the most dazzling beauty and power. Anyone would be nervous and fearful when they were summoned by this woman. But this man did not seem to have such emotions. His gaze was fixed forward, and his steps were steady. The Empress was sitting on the phoenix chair in the study. The spring in front of her was still giving off milky, white spirit energy. Threads of spirit energy wrapped around the spirit lotuses that were almost as perfect as her. When this man slowly walked into her study, she slowly raised her head. In this kind of day, her beauty was even more dazzling, and her gaze even more authoritative. The man dressed in yellow official robes with python embroidery walked until he was 20 steps away from her before stopping. Then, he only bowed slightly in greeting. To be able to enter her study and stand 20 paces from her, this was an honor for all the officials of the Qin dynasty. This man had such an honor because he was one of the generals with the highest military power in the Qin dynasty. He was the general of the Dragon Tiger Northern Army, Liang Lian, who had completed his military service and was most likely to be made a marquis. I have already warned you. Even if you want to take that piece of meat from the marketplace, you cannot use such simple and crude methods. You must be more gentle and careful. Without wasting words, the Empress looked at Liang Lian and said, "You disappoint me greatly." Liang Lian said apologetically, "That was an accident." A hint of coldness appeared on the Empress' perfect face. "This was not an accident, but your choice. If you had not wanted to kill a wine shop youth who had some connection to Wang Taishu, you would not have disturbed Shui Wangshu. Even if that gangster was not killed immediately, he would not have survived. If Shui Wangshu and Du Qingjiao were so weak, they would have disappeared from Chongling long ago. Would White Goat Cave need to merge into the Green Vine Sword Academy?" The Empress looked at the silent Liang Lian and said with slight disdain, "It was you who wanted to get rid of the roots, so you failed in the end." Liang Lian's brow furrowed slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "To cut the grass, one must remove the roots. This is where your problem lies." The Empress looked coolly at him and said slowly and coldly, "You only cared about what you were doing, but did not think that any Chongling cultivator is a precious treasure of our dynasty. I heard that youth reached profound understanding in half a day and may reach energy refinement in a month. A youth like this may become a great asset of the country in the future. Many people do not care that you want to take that piece of meat. Anyone can understand that you want to be made a marquis and build up enough power to become a marquis. Yet you are too vicious in your handling of this matter. There is nothing that can be kept secret. Even if Zhou Jianlin and the others die, there will not be any evidence that you did this. But their impressions of you do not need any evidence. In the eyes of those important people who can decide your future, Zhou Jianlin and the others are the same as that youth. They are all cultivators of our dynasty. Even if they are going to die, they will die on the battlefield, and not in a conspiracy like this." The Empress shook her head and said in slightly vulgar words, "Chongling is so large. The Qin dynasty is so large. The Qin dynasty is not afraid of people stealing meat to eat. There is so much meat. Even if more people steal, how can it all be taken? We are only afraid of our own people killing each other. Just your attitude in dealing with your subordinates this time, your viciousness, will chill many people's hearts and cause many people to be afraid and wary. Also, you should know that many people have deeper misgivings about you. Maybe I am wrong, but most of the time, I am only working for you and your family." Liang Lian looked at her and said softly, "Will I have a chance in the future?" The Empress did not look at his face. She looked at the holy spirit lotuses in the spirit spring and nodded slightly. "Of course there will be a chance, like the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde or the 9-Death Silkworm." Liang Lian did not say anything else. He bowed respectfully and left. Mother Empress. After Liang Lian's figure completely disappeared from the stone path outside, an imperial prince about the same age as Ding Ning suddenly came out from behind a curtain behind the Empress. His features were similar to the Empress. He was very beautiful, even somewhat feminine, and appeared too delicate. However, his eyes were exceptionally lively, as if he was very curious about everything. That wine shop youth has never cultivated before, but reached profound understanding in half a day, and was able to kill cultivators in the military. Is there a problem with his origins? This imperial prince said excitedly after he appeared behind the Empress. The Empress seemed to dote on him. A rare smile appeared on her face, and her tone was exceptionally gentle. If there is a problem, Fang Xiumu and the people of the Divinity Bureau would have detected it long ago. Also, regardless of whether there is a problem, you do not need to spend any effort on a person like him. Because you are different from other people. Fu Su, you are my son, the future crown prince of the Qin dynasty. She smiled and said softly, "You do not need to look at these small details. Even if he can reach energy refinement in a month for people in Chongling and your position, he is as small as an ant. You only need to look at the big picture. You only need to pay attention and observe those people who are already standing high enough. If you truly understand how to interact with these people standing high in Chongling, you will be able to stand firm. Like that Li Lingjun. A hint of a scornful smile appeared on her perfect face. He is an outstanding person and stands high. But his weakness is that he has to attend to everything personally. With his abilities, if he pays attention to the small details, he will do the small things better. But a person's energy is limited. If he is too tired, he will not be able to handle everything with ease. Mother Empress, thank you for the reminder. This son will study carefully after returning. This imperial prince smiled and said coquettishly, but if this person really reaches energy refinement in a month, and in a place like White Goat Cave, this son has to submit. Sometimes it is good to submit. The Empress put away her smile and said clearly, I fear that he will be like this Liang Lian, unable to submit, and has an obsession. Hearing this, the imperial prince said seriously, General Liang is a talent. Mother Empress, please enlighten him a few more times. I hope he will not make a mistake. The Empress looked at his bright and pure eyes and smiled slightly. Among all the imperial princes, only Fu Su, who is so generous, would say such a thing. Being too lenient was the greatest weakness for most people, but for the future ruler of Chongling and the future ruler of the Qin dynasty, leniency was the greatest advantage. But being too generous was being too soft-hearted. So she said seriously, you have to listen to Prime Minister Yan's lessons. He will teach you more about interacting with people. Nay, on the mountain path outside the Green Vine Sword Academy, multiple hoarse shouts sounded at the same time. Multiple carriages coincidentally came from different mountain paths. If they were not separated and avoided each other, there would be carriages squeezing down the mountain path when they met. Following the arrival of these carriages, more carriages appeared one after another on the mountain path in the distance. Probably because they felt it was troublesome to avoid each other, many passengers in the carriages lifted the curtains and walked towards the gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy. The passengers in these carriages were students from cultivation places close to the Green Vine Sword Academy in Chongling. These students had come at this time to watch the Green Vine Sword Academy's annual sword trial festival starting tomorrow. This kind of ceremony between close schools was a good opportunity to learn from each other. However, there was a limit to the number of people. Usually, only the most outstanding students the academy valued qualified to come. Because there were several opportunities to meet each year, and some people had personal relationships, as the students from various cultivation places arrived, the usually quiet gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy immediately became lively. Among these students, Su Hashan of Pine Sword Academy, Xia Chongsheng of White Cloud Monastery, and others were present. But among these young talents from various cultivation places, the most famous was Ku Shichuan of Shadow Mountain Sword Cave. Shadow Mountain Sword Cave was stronger than Green Vine Sword Academy and other cultivation places. Ku Shichuan was recognized as the student of Shadow Mountain Sword Cave who progressed the fastest in the last few decades. He cultivated for a month and reached profound understanding. In 3 months, he reached Realm 2, Energy Refinement Realm. This kind of speed was astounding in all of Chongling, except for a rare few monsters. At this time, the most outstanding student of Shadow Mountain Sword Academy was dressed in a jade green satin robe. He had a handsome face, sword-like brows, thin lips, and a straight nose. He stood in the crowd, talking and laughing. Without showing his cultivation, just his figure alone was enough to make him stand out. The more outstanding a young person was, the more confident and proud they would be. Hearing his friends talk about how after White Goat Cave and Green Vine Sword School merged together, White Goat Cave would participate in the Sword Trial Festival starting tomorrow. They also mentioned the youth who had reached profound understanding in half a day, or even energy refinement in a month. He smiled slightly and said, profound understanding in half a day may be a coincidence, and he sensed the existence of the energy sea. But from Realm 1 to Realm 2, there is no finesse in comprehending the mysteries of energy refinement. Profound understanding does not mean that reaching Realm 2 will be fast. They say it is possible to have a breakthrough in a month, but there have not been any news of a breakthrough up until now. This means it is impossible to be so fast. This is just White Goat Cave's best hope. Hearing him say this, someone said half-jokingly, Ku Shichuan, do you think this wine shop youth cannot do it because you cannot do it yourself? Do you think I am jealous? Ku Shichuan's smile immediately disappeared. He was not angry and said seriously, I do not care about these things. I only care about the Min Mountain Sword Sect exam. Chapter 58. When Ku Shichuan spoke, the area in front of the Green Vine Sword Academy suddenly became silent. Nearby, Su Hashan and Xie Chongsheng stopped talking. Xie Chongsheng couldn't help but shake his head and say with slight disdain, even if he has such ambition, he does not need to say it so publicly to show his extraordinariness. Su Hashan was slightly convinced and said softly, at least he has such ambition. Students from more than a dozen cultivation places had gathered here, but only 3 or 4 of them qualified to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials. Of the 3 or 4 cultivation places that qualified to attend, only Ku Shichuan dared to say so. The others knew they were not strong enough and could only be green leaves in the background at the trials. Ku Shichuan naturally could not guarantee that he would obtain a chance to enter Min Mountain Sword Sect to study at the trials. But he could use this as a goal. Compared to the people around him who did not even associate him with the trials, his words had the meaning of, you sparrows do not know the ambitions of the swan. Xie Chongsheng, Su Hashan and the others felt that Ku Shichuan had the right to be proud, so they only muttered in private and did not want to publicly refute Ku Shichuan. However, some of the students present were of great birth, but were not as strong as Ku Shichuan. After a short silence, someone could not help but say softly, Brother Gu's ambitions are great, and we cannot compare. But if Ding Ning of White Goat Cave is like in Baoshu of Lingshu Sword Gate and Jing Liuli of Min Mountain Sword Sect, energy refinement in a month, and then his cultivation speed is similar to the 2 of them, maybe he'll be a strong opponent by the time of the Min Mountain Sword Trials. Really? Ku Shichuan looked at that person and smiled slightly. He said, then we have nothing to do. So let's make a bet. Let's see if Ding Ning can have a breakthrough today and reach energy refinement in a month. Hearing this, most of the people present felt that it was meaningless. Because at least until yesterday, everyone was sure that Ding Ning had not broken through to the next realm. With today as the deadline, the probability of Ding Ning breaking through to the next realm was too slim. In reality, everyone present felt that it was impossible for the wine shop youth of White Goat Cave to reach energy refinement in a month. Energy refinement in a month was only possible because of the records of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. Could it be that Ding Ning could really reach the qi refining stage within a month? If most people bet that it was impossible, then even if a minority bet that it was possible, most people wouldn't be able to bet even if they won. However, at this moment, a rather immature but rebellious voice rang out, all right, if that's the case, then I'll bet 3 mica knife coins that Ding Ning can successfully break through today. Hiss, gasps could be heard in front of Green Vine Sword Academy's mountain gate. Everyone's gaze gathered on that person. 1 mica knife coin was worth 500 gold. 3 was 1,500 gold. Most of the students present would not be able to gather so much money in a short time. The students even thought that the speaker was joking. But when they saw the speaker and the 3 knife coins he took out from his sleeve, everyone knew that this person was not joking. This person was Xie Chongsheng of White Cloud Monastery. The Xie family was rich in Guangzhou. Other people could not afford to bet 1,500 gold, but he could. What are you doing? Su Hashan beside Xie Chongsheng had an expression of disbelief. Money is just worldly possessions. Xie Chongsheng twisted his mouth and answered softly. In reality, when Ku Shichuan was mocking him, he had been slightly displeased. When he saw Ku Shichuan proudly propose a bet, he could not control himself. Oh. Ku Shichuan saw that it was Xie Chongsheng and frowned slightly.
She wanted to speak.
It seemed that as long as he spoke, the bet would naturally go through. However, at this moment, there was another sound of reining in the horse. Xie Chongsheng. Is the money of the family not money? You think that you can squander it as you wish when it is in your hands? Xie Changsheng. You think that because father gave you such a name, you can really win, and win every bet? Along with the clear sound of reining in the horse, angry female voices rang out one after another on the mountain path. Xie Changsheng shuddered, and his face paled. What is going on? Su Henian followed the crowd's gaze and saw a tall young woman with murderous eyes flash out of a stopped carriage. This young woman had a pretty oval face and a well-proportioned body. Her long hair was tied up with a jade hairpin, which made her neck appear even more slender.
Who is she?
Su Henian couldn't help but look at Xie Changsheng and ask. He knew that this young woman was a student of Tai Shaoli Palace from the two words Tai Shaob embroidered on her green robes. Tai Shaoli Palace had been on the Green Vine Sword Academy's invitation list for the past few years, but the number of students from Tai Shaoli Palace had been relatively small, so he had never seen this young woman before. She is my older sister, Xiero. Her name is Gentle, but she is not gentle at all, Xie Changsheng said softly with a bitter expression. Su Heshan couldn't understand. Even if she was his older sister, he didn't have to be so scared. I can't beat her. Besides, we're studying outside. Father asked her to take care of the money. I want to take it from her. Xie Changsheng seemed to know what Su Heshan was thinking, so he added softly. Su Heshan's expression instantly relaxed. His heart was filled with sympathy for Xie Changsheng. After all, he was used to Xie Changsheng squandering money like it was dirt. If Xie Changsheng, who was used to squandering money casually, had no money to squander, then it would be really hard to bear. He might even feel uncomfortable all over and affect his cultivation progress. Then why did she call you Xie Changsheng? Su Heshan lowered his voice and asked as he looked at the tall girl who was walking closer and closer to him with a face full of anger. Xie Changsheng's expression became even more bitter. My real name is Xie Changsheng, but I felt that this name was too old-fashioned, so I changed it to Xie Changsheng. Su Heshan was startled. It really is old-fashioned. However, he immediately said seriously, but no matter how old-fashioned it is, you can't just change the name father gave you.
What's there to change?
You even changed your name? Xiero was already close enough. She faintly heard Su Heshan's words and instantly raised her eyebrows. She looked at Xie Changsheng with a frosty expression and said sternly, How dare you? How could I? Xie Changsheng's expression was abnormally ugly as he argued, Who here doesn't know that I am Xie Changsheng? Su Heshan's mouth twitched when he heard this. He wanted to laugh but didn't dare. From now on, Xie Changsheng could only revert to his real name, Xie Changsheng.
Is that so?
Xiero looked gloomily at her younger brother, Xie Changsheng, who was a good-for-nothing in her eyes. Then you can shout loudly here.
My name is Xie Changsheng.
The previous Xie Changsheng, now Xie Changsheng, instantly flew into a rage out of humiliation. He shouted, Sister? What are you doing? Isn't it just a bet? This Ding Ning has reached the mystic understanding realm in half a day. It's not like he'll lose for sure. If he's just an ordinary commoner with no nobles or great clans to support him, and I heard that he was seriously injured in the previous incident. Xiero, this tall and domineering young woman, had a mocking smile on her face. If he can break through to the Qi refinement realm in a month like this, then I might as well just let him be your brother-in-law. The entrance of the Green Vine Sword Academy instantly fell silent. Everyone was speechless. Wasn't Xie Changsheng's sister Xiero herself? Xiero said to let him be Ding Ning's brother-in-law. Didn't that mean that if Ding Ning's talent was so astounding, she would marry Ding Ning? People often said that the women of Guanzhong were heroic. Now, it seemed that they were very different from the women around Chongling. Even if these were just words of anger to scold her own younger brother, it was still too shocking for a young woman to say such words in Chongling. As powerful as expected. No wonder you're so afraid of her. Su Heshan swallowed hard and couldn't help but whisper by Xie Changsheng's ear. Eldest sect brother, what is junior sect brother Ding Ning's cultivation? At this time, in White Goat Cave, many students had surrounded Zhang Yi and were asking about Ding Ning's cultivation. Very difficult. Zhang Yi couldn't help but glance in the direction of the grass hut hidden in the gorge. He understood the emotions of these students. From their doubts about Ding Ning at the start, many White Goat Cave students now had high expectations of Ding Ning. But he still explained truthfully. He opened the Jade Palace in the middle of the month. Based on the speed of the 5 energies, unless his cultivation progress is extremely stable and there are not many obstacles in his breakthrough like when he reached profound understanding in half a day, he may reach energy refinement realm today. Hearing Zhang Yi's explanation, the White Goat Cave students around him were slightly disappointed. In the quiet grass hut, Ding Ning was calmly cultivating. The Jade Palace in the depths of his energy sea had already been completely lit up by the 5-colored Yuan Qi. At this moment, the 5 energies flowing in his energy sea had already flowed upwards from the Jade Palace, forming a pillar of energy. In a slow and unusually steady manner, it was moving towards the top of his energy sea, towards the brightest space. That brightest space was the celestial aperture. At this time, the top of the energy pillar was only a sliver away from that bright space. Just as the White Goat Cave students around Zhang Yi dispersed in disappointment, this last sliver of distance slowly disappeared under the slow and steady movement of the energy pillar. Ding Ning's body shook slightly. Energy Sea, Jade Palace, and Celestial Aperture were completely connected. The 5 energies flowed down from the Celestial Aperture like a waterfall. Without any delay or hindrance, under the guidance of Ding Ning's psyche power, a part of the 5 qis that were circulating in the sky began to condense in a mysterious way. Some milky white physical energy that was many times heavier than the 5 energies in his body started to form and settle down. His energy sea started to change from being filled with the 5 energies to being filled with this kind of physical energy. This was energy refinement realm. At this time, many people were discussing his cultivation. Even eldest sect brother Zhang Yi, who had always favored him, did not have confidence in his breakthrough. The students at the gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy thought this was impossible. Yet no one knew that for Ding Ning, this was an inevitable matter. This was just part of the plan. So this afternoon, while many people were still arguing about this matter, in this quiet grass hut, Ding Ning quietly had a breakthrough. Energy refinement in a month. Chapter 59. As his energy sea was filled by the physical energy, and as the physical energy started to permeate his body, a fresh presence spread from his body. It was like an orchid that was slowly blooming at this moment. Li Daoji was standing in front of the leek field outside the grass hut. While he did not know the changes in Ding Ning's body, he knew Ding Ning's previous cultivation best. He knew that Ding Ning's cultivation had been extremely stable before this. This stability made him feel anticipation. As he looked at the clouds in the sky, he suddenly sensed the fresh presence coming from the grass hut. He immediately understood what Ding Ning had done. A rare excited smile appeared on his face. His feet tapped lightly on the ground, and he jumped forward. His figure passed through the white clouds and landed on the mountain path of White Goat Cave. Usually, he would fly like this, but this time, he jumped hard and landed astoundingly high. With a bang, the sound of his landing echoed in the mountain valley. Many people noticed Li Daoji's abnormality. Zhang Yi had been descending the mountain and preparing to cultivate at the bottom of White Goat Cave. But when he saw Li Daoji's strange expression, he thought of a possibility and his body inexplicably froze. Sect Uncle Li Daoji. He bowed with folded hands. Before he could say more, Li Daoji nodded at him from the mountain path, not far above, and said, he had a breakthrough. This is... Zhang Yi's stiff body shook violently. Although he was somewhat prepared, when he heard this, he was so surprised that he almost fell down the mountain path. This is astounding. Many breaths later, he finally recovered his wits with a trembling voice and was able to say such a complete sentence. Ding Ning really had a breakthrough? Ding Ning really broke through from Realm 1 to Realm 2? Ding Ning really reached energy refinement in a month. Almost all the White Goat Cave students had walked onto the mountain path outside. Everyone's mouths were open as though they were looking at a sudden storm. They looked up at the sky. Really? At this moment, even Shui Wangxiu, who was meditating in the tallest Taoist temple, felt this strange sound. He opened his eyes and instantly understood what had happened. Ouch! A soft cry of pain was heard. He accidentally tore off several strands of his beard. The sun was already setting in the west, and the sunset glow was getting thicker. The Green Vine Sword Academy was already preparing a banquet to welcome the students. The students from the 20 or so cultivation grounds who had come to watch the ceremony had all arrived. They gathered in an empty space in front of a stone hall in the Green Vine Sword Academy. In addition, the students from the Green Vine Sword Academy had also joined in, so the scene became even more lively. Nangong Kaishu was sitting beside Su Hashan and Xie Chongxing. Xie Chongxing's fearful sister, Xie Ro, was sitting close to Xie Chongxing. Xie Chongxing had a bitter expression on his face. From time to time, he would receive a few words of reprimand. Up until now, White Goat Cave has not moved at all. A month has passed. Now, someone is betting with you. Do you still want to bet? I don't know what you are thinking. Even if you have not seen the hardships of people earning money, you should think more for the family. Why did you jump out to argue with Ku Shichuan? Ku Shichuan may enter Min Mountain Sword Sect to study. Even if he loses in the Min Mountain Sword trials, with his present cultivation, he will have good achievements in the future. The family's business is about peace and prosperity. You are the one who causes trouble the most. If you do not restrain yourself, you will make enemies for the family everywhere. The family gives you money for you to use on cultivation or travel and make friends. Is it for you to use to bet on this wine shop, youth? Xie Chongsheng was used to Xie Ro's temper and discipline. Adding on that his daily expenses were in her hands, he could only say inside that he could not hear. He could not hear. But Nangong Saishu's eyebrows rose when she heard Xie Ro mention the wine shop youth. I heard that you said in front of the Green Vine Sword Academy that if Ding Ning had a breakthrough in a month, you would have him become Xie Chongxing's brother-in-law. She could not help but look at Xie Ro, who had a stern expression, and interrupted. Does Xie Chongxing have any other sisters?
He only has me as his sister.
Xie Ro heard Nangong Saishu's words. She smiled and said, Sister Kaishu, not to mention that he only has me as a sister. Even if he does, can I make the decision for someone else in such a major matter? Nangong Kaishu thought of Ding Ning's health and the pill medicine her father had not given to Huyin. She grew even more impatient. She said with a stern expression, Then you are serious? If Ding Ning really reaches energy refinement in a month, you will marry no one else but him? Su Hashan was shocked. He thought inside, was it really autumn and dry that even people were easily impatient? Why was Nangong Saishu's words so cold and sharp today? Looking at Nangong Saishu's cold expression, Xie Ro stilled slightly, but then smiled unconcernedly. Who does not know that the Xie family always keeps our promises? I am not a man, but I will not go back on my words. Just now, Nangong Kaishu had not spoken in a low voice, so Su Hashan felt that Nangong Kaishu was strange today. Xie Ro's response was powerful and everyone around heard it. Not far away, Ku Shichuan had been drinking by himself. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but shake his head in ridicule. He thought it had been so long since they had entered the sect, and they were still talking about that person. So boring. However, it was also at this moment that several heavy footsteps sounded. Someone rushed over and could not control the physical energy under their feet. They stirred up large amounts of dust. Nangong Kaishu frowned and looked towards the sound. She found it was her senior sect brother, Xiang Miao. This Xiang Miao had joined the sect a year earlier than her and was honest. Usually, he was steadier than her, but right now he was in a state of shock and panic. She couldn't help but ask senior sect brother Xiang what happened. Why are you so panicked? 111. Xiang Miao's face was red and his breathing was rapid. His emotions were too strong. He said 1-3 times but could not say anything else. Nangong Saishu's eyes suddenly lit up. Her breathing paused and she instinctively shouted, Has Ding Ning really reached Realm 2 and reached energy refinement in a month? When the students heard Nangong Saishu's words, Their first reaction was to feel it was impossible. But Xiang Miao's reaction caused the scene to sink into absolute silence. Everyone seemed to be frozen by the cold north wind. Xiang Miao breathed heavily and nodded. Ku Shichuan's mocking expression froze on his face. His fingers also froze. He felt a great shock and absurdity that caused his mind to ring. This is true. A loud exclamation came from Xie Chongqing's mouth and broke the silence. The emotions on his face were very complicated, like a painting that had been painted with all kinds of colors. Xiang Miao nodded again. At this time, he was finally able to speak. He struggled to say, White Goat Cave just sent news. Ding Ning has had a successful breakthrough and reached energy refinement realm. Ku Shichuan's face started to pale, his stiff fingers trembling slightly. He did not need to verify anything because this news was too shocking. Xiang Miao must have verified it before coming in to announce it. But no one noticed his expression at this time. Everyone's eyes involuntarily gathered on Xie Rou, who was beside Xie Chongsheng. Everyone wanted to know what she was going to say. Xie Rou's face was snowy white, her eyelashes trembling. The domineering and strict sister seemed to have become a weak and pitiful young girl that needed to be relied on. Nangong Kaishu felt even happier. She wanted to laugh out loud. Yet to her and everyone's surprise, Xie Rou's weakness turned to toughness in a moment. Her lips were still trembling, but the lines on her face turned cold and hard. The words of the Xie family of Guanzhong are as good as gold, and will not change. Since Ding Ning has a breakthrough today and reached energy refinement in a day, I will keep my promise and marry no one but him. Everyone present wanted to see her make a fool of herself. Even her younger brother, Xie Chongsheng, was like this. However, as these two sentences left her mouth, everyone present was shocked by her. Xie Chongsheng was completely stunned. Was this for real? What made everyone present speechless again was that a clear and melodious sound rang out. She pulled out the long sword at her waist. Her sword was thick, heavy, and straight, completely unlike the swords women usually used. The blade and edge were gray-black, like the color of half-burned coal. The straight spine of the sword was bright white. This black and white sword, no matter if it was the hilt, the shape, the size, or even the scabbard, was most in line with the standards and etiquette of the Guanzhong region. Swoosh, a light sound was heard. The long sword in her hand gently sliced through the cold air and a strand of her hair. A strand of black hair floated down and landed in her hand. The eldest daughter of the Guanzhong Xie family, Xie Rou, swears here. Her cold voice rang out once more, shaking one's heart. Everyone was shocked speechless. No one had expected this Guanzhong woman's personality to be so strong that she would swear such a heavy oath in front of everyone. Chapter 60. The banquet Green Vine Sword Academy prepared for the students who came to watch was exquisite and beneficial to cultivation. The wine was made from the green Bodhi fruit from the nearby mountains. It could replenish energy and prolong life. Some rare medicinal herbs were added to the 5 grains and miscellaneous grains, which were very beneficial to cultivation. One of the main dishes was frost serpent meat. The frost serpent was a serpent that lived in cold ponds. It was truly rare and could only be killed by multiple realms 6 cultivators working together. While the most valuable items were the serpent horns and pelts, followed by the bones and skin, even the frost serpent meat contained energy that was beneficial to cultivators, so it was priceless. Ordinary cultivation sects could only obtain it by chance. The dinner in Falling Parasol Street was very simple. When Ding Ning pushed open the half-closed door of the wine shop in the night, he saw that what welcomed him was rice covered in pieces of cured meat and cabbage. This rice clearly had just been brought out, so there was still steam rising from it. Ding Ning looked at Zhang Sun Qianxue, who was sitting by the table with this rice, and showed a warm smile. He sat down and started to eat. "You came back earlier than usual today." Zhang Sun Qianxue looked at him and said. Ding Ning made a sound of acknowledgement and said as he ate, "Because tomorrow is the Green Vine Sword Academy's Sword Trial Festival. Do you not find it troublesome to travel so quickly?" Zhang Sun Qianxue seemed to think of something, and her gentle expression turned slightly cold. You do not need to come back every day. But if I am not here, I cannot sleep well. Dingning looked at her and said seriously, I do not find it troublesome, but Li Daoji and the others find it troublesome. Today, when I came back, they sent 3 carriages to follow me, so I decided to get a good ranking in this sword trial festival and propose that I can spend most of my time cultivating outside. This way, I will have more freedom to inquire about matters. Zhang Sun Qianxue sneered. Even if it's a small sex trial, with your current strength, you shouldn't be thinking about ranking. You should be thinking about how to protect your life. After Ding Ning finished all the food in his bowl, he said, the reason I must get a ranking is because White Goat Cave is good, and I need that spirit vein to cultivate, and also because of you. Zhang Sun Qianxue frowned. My relationship? Ding Ning looked at her and said, because the Green Vine Sword Academy's most important prize is the Green Suet Jade. You should know that other than the Green Suet Jade being of good use when breaking through from Realm 3 to Realm 4, this kind of jade can also allow cultivators to better receive some life bond items. After a slight pause, Ding Ning said in a heavier tone, this is especially important to you. Zhang Sun Qianxue was silent for a moment and then said without emotion, you and your master are not the same kind of person. He only knows how to think for himself. Ding Ning was stunned. In the years he had spent with Zhang Sun Qianxue, he was extremely familiar with Zhang Sun Qianxue. Unless it was a very special occasion, Zhang Sun Qianxue would not mention that person of her own accord. While Zhang Sun Qianxue did not have any obvious emotions on her face, he could sense the different emotions in Zhang Sun Qianxue's eyes. In these few short breaths, his body unconsciously trembled. He thought of what today was for Zhang Sun Qianxue. There were many special days in a person's life. For example, when they first met, when they parted, when they would never see each other again. However, these were very special days to him. Others might not even know about them or remember them. Ding Ning's body froze slightly. He looked at Zhang Sun Qianxue and said softly, does that person really only think for himself? At least in the eyes of others. Zhang Sun Qianxue looked at the flickering candlelight and said, at least in the eyes of others, he will do anything for his own thoughts. It was truly late autumn, just a hair's breadth away from the first snow. Many of the tall trees in the valley only had a few yellow leaves left on their branches. Looking down from above, there were fewer obstructions. They could admire the wild chrysanthemums in the forest, and also the swords. This was a good time to observe the ceremony. In the morning, all the students of the Green Vine Sword Academy and the students of the 20 or so academies who had come to watch the ceremony had finished washing up and were waiting for the arrival of the White Goat Cave students. Yet, the first to break the silence of the Green Vine Sword Academy was not a carriage from White Goat Cave, but a galloping horse. The dusty, short-haired man on the horse was wearing a dark purple military officer's uniform with a fierce tiger embroidered on his chest. When he was still dozens of feet away from the gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy, this rider seemed to think the galloping horse was too slow. He flew up and landed in front of the stone stele at the gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy. I have something to see, Nangong Kaishu. Facing the numerous Green Vine Sword Academy students who had been preparing to receive the White Goat Cave people, this cold man with a weathered face said simply and politely, a general in the military wants to see me? Nangong Kaishu, who had been waiting quietly among the students of the Green Vine Sword Academy, thought of a possibility the moment she received the news. Her heart beat violently, and she almost sprinted to the gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy. Uncle Hua Qingfeng? Seeing the short-haired man standing at the gates, Nangong Kaishu exclaimed in shock. Why have you come? Isn't it because your letter is more urgent than Changling's military orders? Seeing the shocked Nangong Kaishu, this short-haired general smiled slightly. He took out a jade box and handed it to her. Also, this pill medicine is slightly domineering. Your father fears that you will not care enough just by writing a letter. I happen to be passing through Chongling on military business, so he told me to come and tell you in person. Nangong Kaishu's breathing paused slightly. The moment she took the jade box, her palms were covered in sweat. What pill medicine is this that you have to come personally? This is the yellow court gold pill of the former Han Dynasty's yellow court pill sect. Hua Qingfeng put away his smile and said seriously, the yellow court pill sect was not very famous before the Han Dynasty was destroyed, but the pills they made were mostly unorthodox and unusually violent. This yellow court gold pill's effect in increasing cultivation is astounding. It is enough for a cultivator who has just entered Realm 2 to reach the later stage of second-class bone washing. However, the medicinal power of this pill is extremely mixed. Many of the medicinal powers are deeply rooted in the body. After reaching vital energy realm, the vital energy will not be so pure. Nangong Kaishu hesitated. Many impurities could not be expelled from the body of cultivators. This would cause many problems in the future. If the vital energy was not pure enough, it would affect the power of the vital energy. It would be like the cultivation method would drop in grade. For normal cultivators, the disadvantages of this pill outweigh its advantages. That's why your father specially had me come to see if you've really broken through, if this pill is really just for trade and not for your own use. He's actually very worried that you're stuck at that juncture and have become impatient. Hua Qingfeng looked at Nangong Saishu's smooth skin and his expression relaxed slightly. When I saw you, I was reassured. Ordinary cultivators. Nangong Kaishu had been hesitant, but when she heard Hua Qingfeng's words, her emotions suddenly calmed. She thought of Ding Ning's body and how he did not have much time. She thought of how Ding Ning seemed to only be able to manage the matters in front of him and not the matters in the future. She did not say more, nodded, and then opened the jade box in her hand. She saw a white sealed wax block inside the jade box. At the center of the wax block was a yellow pill the size of a longan. It looked elastic, but also gave off a heavy feeling. This was a pill medicine that had come much later than she had expected, but it was unusually timely for it to arrive now. Nangong Kaishu spoke a few more words with the military general who had watched her grow up. She asked about her parents' recent situation and spoke of her cultivation. The general, completely reassured, left without worry. Nangong Kaishu returned to the gathering place of the Green Vine Sword Academy students and spectators. She held the jade box in her hand. As time passed, she grew more excited and nervous. Multiple carriages slowly passed through the mountain mist and appeared at the gates of the Green Vine Sword Academy. The people of White Goat Cave had finally arrived. At the front was Li Daoji. Following closely behind him were Zhang Yi and Su Qin. Shui Wangxiu and a dozen White Goat Cave teachers were at the back. Ding Ning, who did not have an outstanding figure, was in the middle of a large group of White Goat Cave students. Yet countless gazes still gathered on him. That thin and weak-looking youth was Ding Ning, who reached energy refinement in a month. He looked so ordinary, not like those monsters who were born with a divine light. How could a person like this reach energy refinement in a month? With a buzzing sound, countless whispers could be heard. Duan Mulien, who was in charge of this place and carried 2 swords on his back, unconsciously had an ugly expression. This was the first time a student of White Goat Cave had entered Green Vine Sword Academy after White Goat Cave merged with Green Vine Sword Academy. In his original imagination, the defeated White Goat Cave would naturally be subservient. Yet at this time, because of Shui Wangxi's display of cultivation, and because of this student who reached energy refinement in a month, the arrival of the White Goat Cave students seemed to have the presence of the host. Di Qingmei had clearly expected this. So the Sword Trial Festival had been simple and just waited at the back of the mountain. The people of White Goat Cave came closer. Su Hashan could not help but turn to look at Xiero. He did not know if the events of last night had spread to White Goat Cave, and did not know how Xiero would react. Yet unexpectedly, Xiero seemed calm and expressionless, but Xie Chongqing suddenly took several steps forward and bowed to Ding Ning in the crowd. He said, "Greetings, brother-in-law." This was already a very strange moment. Even Li Daoji was stunned by Xie Chongqing's sudden action. Ding Ning naturally recognized Xie Chongqing. However, he really didn't know what had happened last night at the banquet, so he was completely confused. He looked left and right, then looked at Xie Changsheng, who had a serious look on his face, and pointed at himself. Are you talking to me? Of course. Xie Changsheng looked respectful and courteous. The crowd was in an uproar. Su Hashan, Nangong Kaishu, and the others looked at each other in shock. They could not help but look at Xiero. They thought, had this brother and sister come to an agreement that they were going to seriously mention marriage today? However, in their eyes, Xiero's face was flushed red. It didn't seem like she had made an agreement. Ding Ning was shocked. He also noticed Nangong Kaishu in the crowd, so he looked pleadingly at Nangong Kaishu, wanting to understand what was going on. Yesterday, my elder sister swore in front of everyone that if you really broke through to the Qi refinement realm yesterday, she would marry no one else but you. Therefore, you are naturally my brother-in-law. Xie Changsheng had already spoken while looking at him. You are not joking? Ding Ning stilled. He wanted to laugh but could not. This joke is too big. This is not a joke. A clear female voice rang out. All of the noise in the area disappeared. This was the main character speaking. Everyone's gaze gathered on Xiero. Even most of the people present at the Green Vine Sword Academy temporarily forgot about the Sword Trial Festival and wanted to see how this matter would end. Ding Ning looked dazedly at Xiero. He started to understand that this was the sister Xie Changxing spoke of, the eldest miss of the Guanzhong Xie family. Xiero's blush had faded. Her face was very white and flashed with a porcelain-like light. Xie Changxing silently took a few steps back to Su Hashan, Nangong Kaishu, and the others. What are you doing? Su Hashan and Nangong Kaishu whispered in his ear in puzzlement. They even felt that Xie Changxing's eyes were filled with schadenfreude. I did it on purpose. Xie Changxing lowered his voice. The gloating expression spread from his eyes to his face. Marriage is not a trifling matter. Not to mention that Ding Ning did not know her before. Even if Ding Ning agreed, marriage is not something she can decide on her own. This is all nonsense. Father will not agree to her actions if she makes a big fuss. She may be taken back to be beaten. These years, Father felt that she was steady and had her manage me. Now, I will let Father know that she is even more mischievous. At that time, she will not be the one to discipline me. Maybe she will take money from me. Su Hashan and Nangong Kaishu were speechless. After a long time, Nangong Kaishu finally said, everything is for you to have money to spend. In the end, you pushed your sister to the center of the storm. Is she really your sister? When she beats me and stops me from spending money, I don't know if she treats me as her younger brother. Of the 10 times I was beaten, at least 9 times she complained to Father. Xie Changxing twisted his mouth. This time, it is not my fault. She made a fuss. Otherwise, I would have earned at least 1,500 gold and taught her a lesson. You are younger than us and more childish than us. Nangong Kaishu took a deep breath and said seriously, fortunately, I do not have a younger brother like you. Otherwise, I would beat you every day. Chapter 61. Ding Ning frowned slightly. Zhang Sun Qianxue was right. This Chongling was full of grievances. If one stepped in, they would be entangled in countless grievances. Right now, the grievances were difficult. If there was a debt of affection, it would be even more troublesome. He did not know what to say when Xiero looked at him and said, I have drawn my sword and cut my hair to swear. Many people here can be witnesses, so this is not a joke. Ding Ning looked at her cold face that flashed with porcelain light. His expression grew stern. He said softly in a voice that only he and Xiero could hear, I understand that some people keep their promises, and some people view the reputation of their family as more important than their lives. But we have never met before. For a wager that others may not take seriously, is this not too stubborn? Also, I heard that the Xie family is not an ordinary family. Your family may not agree to your actions. Xiero looked at his stern and calm gaze. She inexplicably felt much calmer. Maybe this youth was extraordinary in some way. At least he did not disappoint her. Being arbitrary in my actions and speaking nonsense is my fault. I should take responsibility. She looked into Ding Ning's eyes and said softly, "I will be responsible for getting my family to agree." Ding Ning's brow furrowed even deeper. He bowed his head slightly, and his gaze landed on his last flower remnant sword. His heart trembled slightly at this moment. Xiero was a young girl who had not cultivated for many years, but her seriousness and gaze caused him to inexplicably think of the master of the last flower sword. "The crux is your opinion." Xiero hesitated slightly, but then her gaze became determined again. She said sincerely, "We have only met for the first time, but I like your calmness more than the young talents around you. Feelings can be slowly nurtured. I only hope that you will not feel this is too sudden and do not think about family status." Ding Ning increasingly felt that Xiero and the master of the last flower sword were similar. If this was a coincidence, then he did not like this kind of coincidence. So he took a deep breath and hardened his heart. He said decisively, "This is not possible. I will not accept your suggestion. So, do not have such thoughts." Xiero's face paled even more. She bit her lips and stubbornly did not speak. Ding Ning raised his head and looked deeply at her. "I will never marry you, so it's best that we don't mention this matter again and let everyone slowly forget about it." Xiero's eyes reddened slightly. She was just a young girl. She did not know how much courage it took to make such a decision. But she took a few deep breaths, her chest rising and falling violently. Then she bowed deeply to Ding Ning. "I was wrong in this matter. You cannot marry, but I cannot not marry." After saying this, she turned and walked back to where the spectating students were gathered. Ding Ning's heart suddenly sank. Other people might not be able to understand even if they heard the words, but Ding Ning immediately understood Xiero's gaze when she turned around. She was even more unyielding than he had imagined. She would not force him to marry her, but she had to marry him. So, if he did not marry, she would not marry. She would not marry anyone else. This seemed laughable. But Ding Ning could not laugh at this moment. Actually, she is a good match. Li Daoji and the surrounding people had maintained their silence. But at this moment, he turned around and sent his voice into Ding Ning's ears. "The Xie family of Guanzhong is rich and will be of great help to your future cultivation. I am very satisfied with her appearance and conduct. I suggest you seriously consider it." "You still want to make trouble? Is there a sect uncle like you?" Ding Ning said angrily.
How old am I? I just started cultivating.
"I have not even seen what the Green Vine Sword Academy looks like." Suddenly, someone comes out and talks about marriage with me. Li Daoji glanced at him and interrupted his words. "The Green Vine Sword Academy and other sites can be seen slowly, but some people will not be seen again after you miss them." Ding Ning grew angrier and said, "Is it really good for her to do this? As an elder, you can see her stubbornness. What you need to do is to think of a way to persuade her to give up this idea in the future. Also, if you really like her, you can have her marry you." Li Daoji rarely saw Ding Ning so angry. He smiled slightly. "I want to, but she does not like me." Ding Ning immediately felt angry. "Sister, I did well in this matter. Can this be considered a formal greeting between you and brother-in-law?" Looking at Xiero, who walked back, Xie Changsheng pretended to be sincere. Xiero's expression was normal. She glanced at him and said, "Childish." Xie Changsheng did not expect Xiero to spit out two words so simply. The pride in his heart suddenly disappeared. Su Hashan and Nangong Kaishu inexplicably felt good about Xiero. The two looked at Xie Changsheng and sighed softly. Careless friends, in the eyes of Duanmu Lian and some teachers of the Green Vine Sword Academy, Xie Changsheng's actions were a farce. But due to his status as an outer-school student who had come to watch, they could not scold him directly. But when they thought of how the solemn sword trial festival at the Green Vine Sword Academy was tainted by such an atmosphere from the start, their expressions grew uglier.
It is about time.
Principal D is waiting at the back of the mountain. The sword trial festival can start at any time. Shui, do you want to rest or go now? Duanmu Lian did his best to not be affected by his bad mood. He went forward and bowed to Shui Wangxiu from a distance. Seeing the white-haired Shui Wangxiu, All the young geniuses who had come to watch felt a chill in their hearts. They realized that this old man was a Realm 7 cultivator that they looked up to. Just an old man with one foot in the grave. He just came to watch. Li Daoji is in charge of everything here. There is no need to ask for my opinion, Shui Wangshu said with a smile when he heard Duanmu Lian's question. It would be good if an old man with one foot in the grave had just come to watch. If they did not have a Realm 7 cultivator like you, Green Vine Sword School would not feel restrained and unable to act freely today. Duanmu Lian cursed inside, but still maintained a cautious and polite expression. He nodded at Li Daoji. The journey is not far, and there is no need to rest. Cultivators do not have to worry about trifles. I think that everyone here feels that it is better to start as soon as possible. Li Daoji was in a good mood, a smile still hanging at the corners of his mouth. Then we will depart immediately. Duanmu Lian did not want to say more. He called down for the students participating in the trial to walk together. The students who were older and could not participate, and the outer school students to follow behind. Teacher, Duanmu. At this time, multiple Green Vine Sword Academy students suddenly spoke. He Zhaoxi is not here. Hearing this name, Ku Shichuan, whose expression had been dark since Ding Ning's arrival, suddenly had a cold light in his eyes. He had never seen He Zhaoxi before, but he knew that He Zhaoxi was an opponent worth paying attention to. In the future, He Zhaoxi might be a threat to him during the Min Mountain Sword trials. Duanmu Lian stilled slightly. If any other student had not gathered at this time, he would be furious. But since it was He Zhaoxi who had not come, his expression improved slightly. He Zhaoxi. He turned and shouted towards the many halls of the Green Vine Sword Academy. His voice spread far away. Many breaths later, there was the sound of tearing air. A handsome young man in a thin green robe with an unusually well-proportioned body flew over from the path in the center of several stone palaces. White steam was still rising from his body. That was not the sweat on his body. The sweat on his body had long been shaken clean by his true qi. His clothes were also very dry and clean. The white steam was only because his body temperature had melted the surrounding white frost. Such a high body temperature meant that he had been doing intense training for his body. Thinking of the rumors about this person's hard work, Ku Shichuan's gaze grew colder. He is He Zhaoxi. Other than eating and going to the toilet, he spends almost all his time on cultivation. He knows that today is the Sword Trial Festival, but he did not want to waste time, so he was still cultivating and only came out now. Ding Ning was carefully examining this youth when Nangong Caishu's voice sounded next to him. Nangong Caishu had walked next to him. If you can avoid him in the trial, do your best to avoid him. Seeing Ding Ning turn around, Nangong Caishu spoke. While everyone's gazes were still on He Zhaoxi, she shoved the jade box she had been holding into Ding Ning's hands. This is the pill medicine my father managed to find. Ding Ning stilled. This was something he had not expected. It just arrived today. This is the Yellow Court Gold Pill of the Yellow Court Pill sect. My father had an uncle who is familiar with me come to tell me that this pill medicine is astounding in its ability to increase cultivation. If you use it with your present cultivation, you can reach the late stages of second-class bone washing. But there will be many negative effects, and your vital energy will not be as pure, Nangong Caishu said softly. Nangong Caishu whispered into his ear. I just heard my uncle say it, and did not have the time to study. So, I feel that it is best for you to wait until after the Sword Trial Festival. After you thoroughly understand this pill, you can decide if you want to use it. Ding Ning nodded. While he had never heard of such an obscure pill medicine, he knew that he could use this pill medicine. With such a pill medicine in hand, he had more confidence in getting into the top 3 in the Sword Trial Festival. Chapter 62. Looking at He Zhaoxi flying over, Duanmu Lian's heart grew hot. The green vine thriving withering art that He Zhaoxi cultivated was the strongest cultivation method of Green Vine Sword Academy. It was especially wondrous, And in his view, the students of Green Vine Sword Academy and White Goat Cave could not compare to him in terms of understanding of some sword manuals. Today, this youth who is outstanding in all aspects would definitely shine brightly and spread the reputation of Green Vine Sword Academy. You should have taken the time to cultivate. Now, there are so many people waiting for you.
You are too impolite.
So while he scolded, there was not much sternness on his face.
He Xiaoxi did not speak.
He bowed in apology and then lined up next to the students of Green Vine Sword Academy. Not far from him, a student of Green Vine Sword Academy had a cautious expression and unconsciously gripped the hilt of his sword. It was Emo Chun. The sunlight grew stronger, and the morning mist in Green Vine Sword Academy dissipated. Everyone followed behind Duan Mulien and the others. They passed through Green Vine Sword Academy and climbed to Heavenly Bamboo Peak. The Sword Trial Festival was held at the bottom of Heavenly Bamboo Peak. The Green Vine Sword Academy had 5 or 6 peaks between Heavenly Bamboo Peak and the slightly shorter Metal Sword Ridge. The distance between these peaks was more than 1,000 feet. Yet, the Green Vine Sword Academy used ropes at the start and vines to wrap around each other. After hundreds of years, countless vines were tied together and formed a dozen vine bridges big enough for carriages to pass through. A wide viewing platform was built at the center of these vine bridges. Some spirit grasses and flowers were planted at the edges of the platforms. From a distance, it was like a pavilion in the air, a celestial residence in the heavens. The dean of the Green Vine Sword Academy, Di Qingmei, stood on a viewing platform closest to the Heavenly Bamboo Peak. His green robe fluttered in the wind as he flew over. Seeing Duan Mulien, Li Daoji, and the others coming up the stairs, his gaze did not linger. He only nodded slightly when He Xiaoxi appeared in his sight. Then he saw Ding Ning next to Nangong Kaishu. Seeing that Ding Ning was clearly younger than the other White Goat Cave students, he understood that this should be the wine shop youth called Ding Ning. Thinking of how this wine shop youth had reached energy refinement in a month, his brow furrowed slightly. But no matter how astounding his talent was, he had learned from the students of White Goat Cave that day that this wine shop youth only cultivated the most ordinary explanation of the spirit source way. So, in his mind, Ding Ning was just a cub that did not pose much of a threat. Whether or not such a cub could grow up was still unknown. What he truly needed to worry about was that old but ferocious beast with exceptionally sharp claws and teeth. So his gaze quickly passed Ding Ning and landed on Xue Wangxiu at the very back. He straightened his expression and bowed to Xue Wangxiu from afar. He said clearly, White Goat and Green Vine combined into one. The atmosphere of this sword trial festival is very different. Xue has reached Realm 7 and is the glory of the two places. Hearing this opening, Xia Chongxing couldn't help but murmur from the back of the crowd. This principal is smart. After White Goat Cave joined Green Vine Sword School, there was no longer the name of White Goat Cave. Anyone else would not mention White Goat Cave at all, and would only mention Green Vine Sword School. He said this to avoid it verbally. In any case, White Goat Cave and Green Vine will belong to him in the future. As long as there are practical benefits, he should be more lenient with his words. Otherwise, if things really get out of hand, with Xue Wangxiu's cultivation, he might end up in a sorry state. Just as he was muttering, Xue Wangxiu smiled slightly and said, D&D is too polite. I am just an old person who came to watch the spectacle. If there is anything you want White Goat Cave disciples to do, just tell Li Daoji. These words sounded polite, but they had a different meaning in Di Qingmei's ears. The meaning was that there was no need to talk to him, talk to Li Daoji. He had been in charge of Green Vine Sword Academy and White Goat Cave, but now he was on equal footing with Li Daoji. The killing intent in his heart soared, but his face remained as calm as an ancient well. The Sword Trial Festival is a tradition of our Green Vine Sword Academy. Our Green Vine Sword Academy's founding master, Qilin Feng, reached Realm 6 today and formed the Life Bond Sword, the Green Vine Wooden Sword. So, every year on this day, our Green Vine Sword Academy will hold this ceremony to commemorate our ancestors. Those who win will receive treasures from the academy, and the academy will arrange for them to cultivate in the outer academy or other cultivation places to obtain the greatest experience. He slowly made a few opening remarks and then nodded at Duanmu Lian. Cultivators do not care about trifles but rules. Next, Duanmu Lian will explain the rules of this sword trial festival. The sword trial valley is right under our feet. This valley is covered in green vines and set up with our unique green vine formation. The path inside is hard to find, and while all the green vines look the same, some will attack cultivators. There are even some vine kings that are stronger than energy refinement first-class cultivators. If you are entangled and cannot break free, remember not to panic. Stop all movements, and the vines will not continue to attack. Otherwise, the vines will tighten, and your life will be in danger if you are not rescued in time. All participating disciples will enter from the entrances we have marked here. They must pass through the entire valley to reach the other exit. Inside, it is forbidden to travel in groups of more than 2. If they encounter each other, they can either fight or flee. There is a time limit of 3 days to pass through the valley. There will be 3 boundaries, and you are not allowed to leave early. Every day at noon, we will use the 4 smoke signals as a signal. You must reach the area between the 4 smoke signals before sunset. Then you must stop in that area. At midnight, you can choose to rest or continue traveling. Duanmu Lian started to explain the rules loudly and clearly. Ding Ning had heard this before, but he still listened carefully. Due to the unification of Aries and Ivy this year, the number of students participating in the trial has doubled compared to previous years. Therefore, the difficulty has increased slightly. Every student will carry a token with them when they enter. They must fight at least once a day and snatch a token. Otherwise, even if they reach the designated area, it will be considered a failure. This year, the resting areas do not have ready food. Some beasts have been placed in the sword trial valley. If they need to eat to replenish their strength, they must hunt on their own. But some of the beasts are not weak, and they must weigh the pros and cons before hunting. As these words rang out, a buzzing sound of discussion rang out in the arena. This is disadvantageous to all students who are not of high cultivation. Hearing the rules that were slightly different from the past, Nangong Kaishu turned around and looked worriedly at Ding Ning. She said softly, "It is especially disadvantageous to you because you have not cultivated for a long time. You have not trained your body much. This kind of rule will easily use up your strength, and your strength will not be able to keep up. You have to fight every day and use up your strength to find food. The further you go, the more disadvantageous it will be." This kind of rule is beneficial to cultivators like He Zhaoxi, who are strong in all areas. But no one can say this is unfair. Ding Ning nodded and said softly, "Because this kind of trial is to select the students who are the strongest in all areas." Nangong Kaishu grew silent. Sometimes, the so-called rules and fairness were like this. They appeared to be the same for everyone, but in reality, they were biased towards one person and then disadvantageous to that person. If there are rules, there will be ways to deal with them. Ding Ning saw her displeasure and said sincerely, "We are born in a world full of rules. We have to survive under the rules. Sister, this kind of rule seems to be disadvantageous to brother-in-law. But even more importantly, this is a very fair rule." Xia Chongsheng listened to Duanmu Lian's narration and turned to look irritatingly at Ding Ning, who was talking to Nangong Kaishu. "Right? What do you think of brother-in-law?" "Very good." However, what he didn't expect was that Xia Ro wasn't angry. She seemed to have seen through his tricks and said mockingly, "I have confidence in him. He should be one of the last 3. Xia Chongsheng stilled for a moment and said angrily, "You changed too quickly? From the start, I had confidence in him and wanted to bet on him winning. You looked down on him, but now you have more confidence than me. He just entered energy refinement. White Goat Cave has Zhang Yi and Su Qin, Green Vine Sword Academy has He Zhaoxi, and Nangong Kaishu is not weak. Why do you think he will be in the top 3? I had not seen him before, so I made such a judgment." Xia Ro glanced at him and said, "But now that I have seen him, I naturally feel different. Xie Changsheng was almost speechless. How is it different? Xie Ro looked deeply at Ding Ning in the distance and said, there is confidence in his eyes, not the kind that is faked. So he appears so calm. This is like buying something. Some people cannot afford it and will pretend to be able to afford it. But he has the confidence of someone who has a lot of money and knows that he can afford it no matter how expensive it is. Xie Ro slowly said, since I was 4 years old, I have seen all kinds of businesses in my family's businesses. I have seen many businessmen. I am sure my eyes are not wrong. Xie Changsheng slapped his forehead and said in depression, is this business? The principle is the same. Xie Ro looked at him and shook her head. You are too naive. You do not understand many principles. Maybe in the future, you will understand. Xie Changsheng was so angry his face paled. How am I young? Xie Ro said disdainfully, it is not like I have never seen you bathe. You are young everywhere. That was when I was young. Xie Changsheng was so angry he trembled and was speechless. You are just a brat. What do you know? Xie Ro said solemnly, do not be proud because of this. I will explain some principles you do not understand to father. And, after a pause, she turned her head and looked deeply at Xie Changsheng. She said, I'm just a woman. In the future, I won't need to carry the burden of the family on my shoulders. If I mess around a little, father will let me do as I please. But you're different. You are a man. Chapter 63. Xie Changsheng took a deep breath and said angrily, can you not always use such a lecturing tone? Xie Ro laughed, her face giving off a cool light. She looked provocatively at Xie Changsheng and said, if you do not want to be lectured by me, then at least surpass me in cultivation and beat me. Xie Changsheng clenched his fists, his face slightly pale. He said angrily, I will definitely surpass you. Xie Ro continued to smile and said, that would be best. Otherwise, if you cannot even defeat one of Li Lingjuan's retainers, that would be truly embarrassing. Xie Changsheng bowed his head and did not speak. On the stage, Duanmu Lian had finished explaining the rules of the Sword Trial Festival. Most people's gazes once again gathered on He Zhaoxi. Of all the students participating in the Sword Trial Festival, He Zhaoxi, Zhang Yi, and Su Qin had the highest cultivation, all above Realm 3 second class. Maybe Zhang Yi and Su Qin were closer to Realm 3 first class than he was, but the difference would not be great. Also, He Zhaoxi's green vine thriving withering art may have unimaginable effects. In terms of physical strength, He Zhaoxi, who had spent a great deal of time on cultivation, was stronger. Under these rules, He Zhaoxi was naturally the most likely to win. Yet, among the many people watching He Zhaoxi, Mo Chen did not think so. He knew that he would surprise everyone in this Sword Trial Festival. All the students participating in the Sword Trial Festival started to walk along the mountain path towards the entrance of the Sword Trial Valley. No one checked if they had any hidden food on them because in the next 3 days, all the students in the Sword Trial Canyon would not be able to see the top due to the concealment of the formation. They would even get lost and take many unnecessary detours. However, the spectators above could see their every move clearly from the platform in the air. Ding Ning followed in the middle of the group. The mountain path grew wider as they went down, but did not reach the bottom of the valley. What appeared in front of them was a cliff about 10 feet down. There were hundreds of green vines hanging down from the cliff. Even though he had never seen the Green Vine Sword Academy's Sword Trial Festival, Ding Ning could guess that all the students participating in the trial would fall into the canyon through these vines. As long as there was a slight difference in time, the formation below would naturally separate them. Duanmu Lian, who had walked to the cliff, did not waste words. He said sternly and coldly, everyone, pick a vine and go down. 20 breaths apart. You have to be careful. Nangong Kaishu looked at Ding Ning and said worriedly, do not be impatient. Ding Ning knew the true meaning of her words, so he smiled slightly and said, you too. If you can't win, then run. In this kind of long trial, no one knows what will happen in the end. Nangong Kaishu pondered over the meaning of Ding Ning's words. Seeing that the students in front of her had started to slide down, she glanced at Ding Ning. "Are you going first or should I?" Ding Ning said, "I am done." Nangong Kaishu looked at him and said seriously, "I hope you will always be before me." Ding Ning smiled slightly. "Thank you for your auspicious words." When it was Ding Ning's turn, Ding Ning's movements were slow and careful. He crouched down, grabbed the vine with both hands, and lowered his body. Then his legs clamped onto the vine like he was climbing a bamboo pole, and he slowly slid down. Seeing his figure slowly fall into the forest below, Nangong Kaishu, who had been waiting at the cliff behind him, was filled with deep worry. No matter what kind of cultivation talent and comprehension one had, some of the body's movements and reactions needed time to practice. Ding Ning's movements, compared to any other cultivator, appeared clumsy. Yet for Ding Ning at this moment, the most difficult thing was to appear clumsy so that the spectators would not see that he was too agile. Today's battle was not like the battle against so many gangsters in the dark alley. This was his first official stop in front of the Chongling cultivators. He could not act without restraint. His feet landed steadily. After confirming that the grass below could hold his weight, he started to examine the surroundings. Looking down from above, this canyon filled with all kinds of giant vines was extremely clear. However, the numerous small trees and giant vines had separated countless maze-like passageways. However, at this moment, when he had truly landed in this place and his feet had stepped onto the soft ground at the bottom of the canyon, he saw that the surroundings were filled with a thin layer of fog. Furthermore, this fog wasn't an ordinary white fog, but a strange faint green color. This kind of mist did not appear to be a hindrance to things in the distance, but it had a strange light refracting effect. It caused everything nearby to be slightly distorted and blurry. The surrounding vines were completely different from when he looked down from above. Looking down from above, there seemed to be some empty space between the trees and vines. Yet, standing here, he saw that the trees and vines were tightly connected, and there were only some arched passageways. His ears were completely silent. Those students who came down around the same time as him should not be too far away from him, but he did not hear any footsteps at all. It seemed that the formation here also had the function of isolating sound. In this way, it would be very difficult to hide or pursue some enemies through sound. The probability of encountering a sudden battle would greatly increase, and at the same time, the difficulty of hunting beasts would also greatly increase. According to the detailed rules that Duanmu Lian had mentioned before, if one did not immediately leave after entering the valley, it would be against the rules to wait here. So Ding Ning started to walk towards the arched passageway in front of him. At the same time, he closed his eyes slightly and started to calmly sense. He sensed that the primal energies of the universe here were chaotic. Under the interference of the green vines absorbing and releasing some unique energies, the primal energies of the universe here were like countless swords floating inside. This kind of setup was useless to cultivators above Realm 6. They could use the vital energy and primal energies of the universe stored in their bodies to create an energy passageway that connected to the world outside the formation. But for students of their level, this was enough. Looking down from the suspended viewing platform between the vine bridges, one could see that the entrance to the Sword Trial Valley was packed with people. Because there were close to 100 students sliding down the vines into the range of a few li, to the people watching from above, this area was now filled with people. There were even 4 or 5 students moving in the area of dozens of feet. But at such a close distance, they did not detect each other. This caused the scene to seem laughable. Xiao's gaze followed Ding Ning. At this time, less than 100 feet away from Ding Ning, there was a student from the Green Vine Sword Academy. This student from the Green Vine Sword Academy was called Zhao Qing. He was from the Pinga region of the Zhao. He had entered the Green Vine Sword Academy in the 8th year of Yuanwu through the examination. He had entered 2 years earlier than Nangong Kaishu. Even now, he was only Energy Refinement First Class, and like most students of the Green Vine Sword Academy, he had not reached Realm 3. But any cultivation place in Chongling was stricter for students from the Zhao, Han, and Wei regions that did not belong to the Qin dynasty. Zhao Qing was able to enter the Green Vine Sword Academy because he was more outstanding than ordinary students of the Green Vine Sword Academy. The strength of his arms was naturally many times greater than ordinary youths of the same age. This was due to his natural constitution. His father had been a famous strongman in the Zhao region. His arms were naturally stronger than ordinary people, and he could use many swords and sword moves that ordinary people could not use. So, he usually used a broadsword that was many times heavier than ordinary long swords, and the sword move he cultivated was the Wild Wind Sword Manual. An extremely heavy sword with a speed as fast as the wind. Its power was naturally astonishing. So, in the depths of Zhao Qing's heart, he did not think that he had no hope of winning. Because he had already experienced the sword trial festival once, he knew that this was not a competition where whoever walked faster would win. He walked even more carefully and slowly than Ding Ning. Just as he slowly walked past an opening that looked like an arch, numerous green vines suddenly reached out silently from the bushes behind him and rapidly approached his back. When these lifelike green vines were only a few feet away from his back, the extremely vigilant Zhao Qing finally reacted. With a fierce shout, his right hand pulled out the broadsword on his back as fast as lightning, swinging it backwards with a backhand swing.
Pop, 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 pop.
The numerous green vines were all shattered into countless green fragments by his sword. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, another green vine stabbed out of the bushes beside him like a sword. This green vine flashed with a cold light that was different from the green vines just now. Zhao Qing realized something, and his expression changed. His mouth once again burst out with a sharp shout, and the real qi in his body no longer stingily poured into the broadsword in his hand. Several straight seal lines on the broadsword in his hand lit up, and a snow-white sword energy flashed out of it. The sword energy at the front of the broadsword was especially strong. It was a ball of several square feet. It felt like he was not using a sword, but an axe. With a clang, the sword and vine met and gave off a metallic sound. His body swayed slightly, and this clearly different green vine was cut down by his sword. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He subconsciously looked down at his feet. The fallen leaves under his feet suddenly jumped up like they were boiling. Multiple thin vines wrapped around his ankles, and in a flash, caused him to lose his balance and fall forward. His broadsword flashed again, and he cut down at his feet. With multiple pops, the vines under his feet were all cut down. But at the same time, he could not block the vines that shot at him in time. He was dragged dozens of feet on the ground, and then hit a tree wall. More vines wrapped around him, not to mention swinging his sword. Even breathing became difficult, and his face flushed red. Zhao Qing gave a sorrowful cry. He was extremely unwilling, but he knew the only thing he could do now was to stay still and not struggle. Why is this year's sword trial festival so much more difficult than in the past? As such a question flashed through his mind, many people exclaimed in shock in the sword trial valley, but they were all isolated by a unique formation. Looking down from the viewing platform in the air, the mountain forest around the entrance to the sword trial valley had become a boiling green sea. Many people were fighting in a panic. Countless broken branches and leaves of the vines were flying everywhere. There were also many people who had been entangled like him and were unable to move. They could only accept the result of their failure from the beginning. All the Green Vine Sword Academy students had the same thoughts as him. Why was this year's sword trial festival so difficult? In the past, it was impossible for the particularly powerful vines that they were used to calling the Vine King to appear in this area. However, this year, not only did it seem like the number of attack points had greatly increased, but it also seemed like there was a Vine King at every attack point. Standing at the edge of the viewing platform, Di Qingmei had an imperceptible smile at the corners of his mouth. He naturally understood the shock and puzzlement of these students because he was the one who had instigated this change. Regardless of the difficulty, it was fair for everyone. But this could ensure that people like He Zhaoxi who wanted to win would win. On the viewing platform on the other side, Xia Rou frowned slightly. Compared to other places, Ding Ning's path seemed relatively calm. But at this time, she saw a slight change in the wall-like vine forest next to Ding Ning. The vines that were originally hanging limply suddenly seemed to be infused with some kind of power and became hard. Like several small swords, they began to silently stab out. Chapter 64. On the other side of the viewing platform, a hint of joy flashed through Ku Shichuan's eyes. His gaze remained on Ding Ning. While the bet outside the Green Vine Sword Academy had not happened because of Xia Rou, he had spoken many words. Ding Ning's energy refinement in a month, and Xia Rou's public vow. The story of these days would spread through Chongling. The more outstanding Ding Ning's performance was, the more disgraceful his performance in this story would be. A disgraceful reputation for a cultivator who had yet to officially step onto the stage of a dynasty would bring countless unfavorable consequences. So when he saw the difficulty of this year's sword trial festival and the traps that appeared along Ding Ning's path, he was filled with joy. In his view, it was absolutely impossible for Ding Ning to pass this test. Ding Ning would be eliminated at the entrance to the sword trial valley. Li Daoji's expression was normal. Looking at the changes in the wall of vines around Ding Ning, he said softly inside, "You're so confident. You cannot let me see your ugly appearance at the first trial." Ding Ning sensed the changes in the wall of vines around him earlier than anyone else. His mental power could only cover a few dozen feet around him. Compared to the mental power of cultivators above Realm 5 Spirit Thought Realm, it was pitifully weak. It was like some fine threads floating in the wind. But compared to cultivators of similar cultivation, his mental power threads were much finer. Zhao Qing, who was not far from him, only sensed the vines when they were a few feet away from his back. He had sensed it when the vines started to change. At the same time, he sensed an even stronger energy being channeled into a completely different vine deep in the wall of vines. With his true strength, he could draw his sword and cut off the vine that hadn't finished accumulating power. However, he knew very well that if he did so, it would definitely arouse the suspicion of the spectators and bring about countless troubles. So in this moment, he just went through the many sword moves of the wildfire sword in his mind, and then reached out to grip the hilt of the last flower remnant sword. At this time, the 3 green vines were a few feet away from him. This was a reasonable distance.
So he attacked.
The broken sword that was the size of a ruler slashed out like lightning. Because he had reached Realm 2, the many small and straight cracks on the sword suddenly filled with vital energy and gave off many soft hums. The seal scripts on the sword that were usually hidden in the dark green light that were hard to see with the naked eye also lit up. Pure white light flowed through the seal scripts and floated upwards. On the dark green blade, it was as if many pure white jasmine flowers had bloomed. Ding Ning's eyes suddenly showed some sadness. He did not retreat a single step. He drew his sword as if he was already at the end of his road. A shadow of a sword appeared beside him. The 3 green vines were cut. It was as if Xie Chongsheng had seen some kind of monster. His mouth suddenly opened to the extreme, revealing a deep throat. Xie Rou's eyes quickly filled with joy. Gasps of disbelief could be heard from the viewing platform. Ku Shichuan's smile froze on her face, unspeakably ugly. At this time, the vine wall around Ding Ning trembled violently. Dozens of shattered vine leaves sprayed out. Then a thick vine that flashed with a metallic light stabbed towards Ding Ning's chest like a sharp sword. The powerful force of this thick vine even brought out a visible gust of wind. Yet Ding Ning advanced instead of retreating. Behind him was his end. Because at this time, numerous thin vines had shot out of the fallen leaves behind him. But because he had advanced in this moment, he had put some distance between him and these thin vines. The last flower remnant sword in his hand once again formed a dense patch of sword shadows. As he moved forward, pieces of vine skin flew into the air and danced around him like wood shavings. However, the thick vine, which was obviously stronger than him, was still unable to entangle him. At the same time, another round of gasps sounded. This thick vine suddenly split into several strands of white silk, softly spreading out in front of him. Ding Ning calmly turned around and swung his sword. The numerous thin vines on the ground were cut apart by his sword. No more vines appeared around him. He put away his sword and continued to advance. In an inconspicuous corner of the viewing platform, Shui Wangshu once again pulled off several white whiskers. He had heard Li Daoji say that Ding Ning had a deep understanding of the Wildfire Sword Manual and had a deep mastery of the sword. Before the sword trial festival, he had not ordered Ding Ning to use the sword in front of him. At his age, he seemed to be entertaining himself most of the time, and it was more interesting to have some anticipation. Yet he had not expected Ding Ning to have such mastery of the Wildfire Sword Manual. Li Daoji's expression did not change, but his eyes were filled with pride. He thought, of all the students here, which one of them could reach such a level in such a short time? As the thick vine was cut into white threads by Ding Ning, Ku Shichuan's face turned from pale to bloody red like he had been slapped twice. He was much stronger than the students of the other schools on the viewing platform, so he knew better what had happened in those few short breaths. Ding Ning cut off the 3 green vines with several sword moves, such as chopping, dragging, and flicking. Then, he used several more exquisite sword moves, such as entanglement, guiding, and knocking to cut off the hard skin of the thick vine, making it so that the thick vine could not wrap around his body. Finally, from the tip of the vine, he had cut horizontally and vertically without any finesse. It was all about precision. In a situation where he was not as strong as the thick vine, he gave people the feeling that he had easily defeated the combined attack of the vines. It was all about the use of these complex sword moves. But how is this possible? Ordinary cultivators might not be able to do this even if they practiced this sword manual for a year. How could he grasp it to such a level in just a month? This is impossible. Many disbelieving shouts sounded, as though they were shouting out his thoughts. Xie Changsheng was one of the people who exclaimed, "It is impossible." The porcelain light on Xiero's face grew brighter. She glanced at Xie Changsheng and said seriously, "Unless he really is a genius, a monster like the people of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate." Ding Ning had walked dozens of steps forward. After leaving the distance closest to the entrance, the number of traps seemed to decrease. Most of the students who were about the same distance as him were not immediately ambushed by the vines. But the shock was still spreading on the viewing platform. There were all kinds of geniuses among the dozens of people who qualified to become direct disciples of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. Some people had never touched a sword, but when they touched a sword for the first time, those swords in their hands were as nimble as their arms and fingers. It was just that those people were too far away from students of the academy like them, because those geniuses were just legends. The dozens of people chosen from the countless youths of the Qin dynasty, vassal countries, and foreign lands were separated by countless layers of distance from them. These people could use all the resources that Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate could give them to cultivate. They could freely enter many of the forbidden places of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. The students of these sects had to win some competitions in their own sects before they could represent their sects to participate in the trials of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. Even if they could pass through countless rounds of elimination and become one of the few winners of the trials, they could only rely on imperial favor to obtain a short chance to enter Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate to cultivate. If they wanted to progress further, or enter some of the forbidden places of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate, they had to participate in the competitions of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. Being able to pass through countless layers of distance was only close to the true direct disciples, so how could these spectating students believe that Ding Ning had the same talent as those direct disciples? Ku Shichuan could not believe, so he naturally found a reason he thought he could endure. Li Daoji, or Shui Wangshu, must have spent a great deal of time on him. The Wildfire Sword Manual only had complex sword forms, and was not like some profound sword manuals that were hard to comprehend just by the combination of vital energy and vital energy. Ding Ning was still calmly moving forward. Many people on the viewing platform looked at Xiao and Ku Shichuan. While they found it hard to believe, they could not help but think that if Ding Ning really had such terrifying talent, Xiao's oath was establishing a special connection between herself and Ding Ning. At the same time, Ku Shichuan, who did not think highly of Ding Ning and did not even feel he was on the same level as Ding Ning, what should he do? Feeling the gazes of the people around him, Ku Shichuan found it hard to control his emotions. He could not help but say coolly, "No matter how nimble the vine is, it cannot compare to a cultivator's sword." Su Hashan's brow furrowed deeply. Young people were naturally more angry. He felt that before Ku Shichuan did not understand Ding Ning at all, and had not seen Ding Ning with his own eyes, it was reasonable for him to say those words at the gates. Ku Shichuan was the best student of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave in decades. He cultivated to profound understanding in a month, and then used 3 months to reach Realm 2 energy refinement. Of all the students present today, Ku Shichuan should be the strongest, and not just by a little. But Su Hashan thought that since Ding Ning had reached energy refinement in a month, and just now had displayed astounding sword skills, then no matter what, Ding Ning had proved his abilities. "What you're saying is pointless." So he could not help but speak. He looked at Ku Shichuan and said coolly, "At least, from everything that Ding Ning has shown so far, he has surpassed most of us present. You look down on him, and you look down on all of us. Also, do not speak too confidently at any time. If the cultivator he faces later is equally outstanding, you will be put on the spot." Su Hashan's words were not polite. Other than coldness, Ku Shichuan could not help but show some viciousness. His lips moved slightly, but he did not speak immediately. Because at this time, he and all the spectators saw Ding Ning and a hurrying student get closer and closer. The two were about to meet. Ding Ning was about to encounter the cultivator's sword. Chapter 65. Ku Shichuan and Su Hashan did not recognize the dark-skinned youth that Ding Ning was about to encounter. They only judged from his uniform that he belonged to the Green Vine Sword Academy. Everyone present from the Green Vine Sword Academy knew that this dark-skinned youth was called Yu Lian and was from Luquan Commandery. Luquan Commandery had many kilns. This Yu Lian was the son of a kiln master. While he was of ordinary birth, his cultivation was above average in the Green Vine Sword Academy. He was in energy refinement first class. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Lian and Ding Ning slowly walked forward with a wall of vines between them. At the end of the path was the same exit. The two would meet. Almost at the same time, Ding Ning saw the dark-skinned Green Vine Sword Academy student beside him. Yu Lian also saw Ding Ning. Their first reactions were the same. They stood where they were and gripped their sword hilts. Ding Ning's expression was calm, but Yu Lian's expression was nervous, and his gaze was hesitant. This was not a trial that could be completed in a day, so everyone wanted to save their strength until the end. But when he thought of how he had to defeat an opponent each day to obtain the other's token, and how the other was the most famous genius of White Goat Cave, the teachers on the viewing platform would be very happy if he eliminated him. When he thought of this, the hesitation in Yu Lian's eyes quickly disappeared into fire. With a soft hum, he stared at Ding Ning and pulled out his sword without a word. His sword was completely red and gave off a jade-like glow. Good sword. Yet Ding Ning looked at his sword and praised. What sword is this? Yu Lian stilled slightly. Out of courtesy, he responded softly, "It is called Dark Fire, from the secret fire sword workshop of Luquan Commandery." Ding Ning nodded and held his sword across his chest. Compared to Yu Lian's dark fire sword, his remnant sword was only a third of the length. It looked pitifully small. Everyone thought that Ding Ning was preparing to fight. Yu Lian also thought that he was about to attack. But in the next moment, Ding Ning's entire body flashed towards a gap in the vine wall. There was an uproar on the viewing platform. Su Hashan and the others were stunned. Ding Ning chose to run away. Although it was indeed possible to escape from the rules of this trial, According to the culture of the Qin dynasty, it was extremely shameful and cowardly to run away from a one-on-one duel. Ku Shichuan was startled, and then a mocking expression appeared on his face. He does not even dare to face the sword of a cultivator. It seems he is not as outstanding as you think. He turned to look at Su Heshan and said disdainfully. Su Heshan frowned as he looked at Ding Ning, who was desperately trying to escape.
He was also unhappy.
Yulian had not thought that Ding Ning would turn and run, but he immediately reacted. With a soft shout, he gave chase. Ding Ning had just reached the energy refinement realm, while he was already at the high level of the energy refinement realm. There were 2 small realms between the two of them, but his figure was clearly much stronger and faster than Ding Ning's. With just a few leaps, he had already caught up to Ding Ning and was less than 10 feet behind him. He could not escape, and people would look down on him. Ku Shichuan's disdain grew. But at this time, something unexpected happened. The vine wall shrouded in green mist around Ding Ning and Yu Lian suddenly shook, and multiple vines shot out like lightning. Ding Ning's steps did not pause at all. He flicked his remnant sword and cut down the first 2 vines that came close to him. Then he continued to charge forward. Yu Lian was shocked. A layer of faint red flames suddenly appeared on the blade of his red longsword. With a sweep of his sword, one of the green vines attacking him was cut in half. The cut was charred black. However, at this moment, with a soft pop, a clump of broken leaves gushed out like a fountain. A thick vine howled in the wind and swept towards him viciously. Yu Lian knew the power of this vine. His expression changed slightly, and another wave of physical energy flowed into his longsword. With a soft hiss, the red flames on his red longsword disappeared. But the temperature of the sword rose rapidly. The sword was completely red, as though it had been in a furnace for a long time. His sword was raised vertically in his hand. Then he suddenly thrust it upwards. The burning red tip of the sword easily pierced through the steel-like skin of this thick vine that was close to his chest and stabbed inside. Many of the students on the viewing platform had cold expressions. They recognized that this was a move of the Heaven-Burning Sword Manual, Heaven-Burning Candle. This was an extremely swift and fierce close combat sword style. It directly fought within a radius of a few feet. If one was unable to dodge the sword, one's lower jaw would be directly pierced from the bottom to the top, and then directly into the brain. This sword was absolutely fatal. At this moment, the thick vine that was reaching over had been pierced by this sword. Seeing that Yu Lian's sword was going to continue forward, he was going to split the thick vine in half with one blow. But at this time, Ding Ning, who had been fleeing in front of him, suddenly stopped and turned around. An inky green sword light flew out of his hand and cut towards Yu Lian's wrist. This was a change that no one had expected. Yu Lian's face was filled with shock and fury. He shouted, and dust and debris flew up from under him. His feet dug deep into the ground like 2 metal pillars. Because at this time, several thin vines were quickly swimming towards his ankles. While he was facing a pincer attack from 3 directions, he did not panic. As he ensured that he could stand firmly in the next moment, his sword suddenly shook, and he raised it to meet Ding Ning's remnant sword. While they could not hear the sound, everyone on the viewing platform could see the hot air around his red longsword explode. The crimson red on the sword quickly faded, and the fire that had been floating on the surface of the sword suddenly spread outwards. The thick vines that had been pinned by his sword quickly turned black and were about to burn. Ding Ning's remnant sword cut into the dark and hot flames. His physical energy flowed into the seal scripts on the inky green sword and formed blossoms of pure white sword energy. Clearly, there was a great difference in power compared to these flames, and the blossoms were extinguished. The burning heat caused his skin to feel burning pain, but he did not put his sword away. His blade clashed with the dark flame longsword, but almost no sound was produced. In this moment, the inky green remnant sword in his hand was like a slippery fish. It slid along the blade of the dark fire sword and cut towards Yu Lian's fingers. Yu Lian felt great disbelief. Had the other practiced with the sword for a long time before cultivation and was able to make such a reaction at this time? His face instantly turned incomparably pale, and the sword in his hand instantly rotated by half a circle. There was a soft sound. Ding Ning's remnant sword was knocked back several feet. Snap, 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 snap. Countless whip-like sounds came from under his feet. Multiple thin vines wrapped around his ankles. They could not drag him away and only created a cloud of dust. Ding Ning's expression was still calm. His feet moved lightly, and the inky green remnant sword once again bloomed with many pure white flowers as it cut towards Yu Lian's wrist. If this was any other time, Yu Lian would have many ways to dodge this attack and even counterattack with his sword. But his sword was in a stalemate with the thick vine. His body was firmly nailed into the ground. If he raised his foot, he feared that he would be dragged away by the thin vines in the next moment. He had no other choice but to abandon his sword. Otherwise, his wrist would be cut off by Ding Ning's exquisite sword. Yu Lian released his sword hand, and his body trembled slightly. There was a soft sound. Ding Ning's sword light turned and caught the hilt of the dark fire sword. He immediately flicked the sword out of the thick vine and out. At the same time, he dodged to the side without stopping. As the thick vine was wrapped around Yu Lian's body, he moved towards the wall of vines again. The remnant sword in his hand once again created dense sword light. In a few breaths, he cut through the thick vine. The severed vines fell from Yu Lian's body to his feet like several coils of thick hemp rope. With Yu Lian's power, he could break the thin vines under his feet. But he did not have a sword in his hand. It was impossible for him to fight against the sword in Ding Ning's hand with just his physical body, even if it was just a broken sword. Also, he knew that if this was a real battle, Ding Ning would not have cut off the thick vine first, but would have killed him first. So, he hung his head sadly and said in a trembling voice, "I lost." Ding Ning nodded. He did not speak, panting as he waited for Yu Lian to hand over his token. There was silence on the viewing platform. "A good sword." Su Hashan's voice broke the silence. He looked at the burning dark fire sword on the ground and started to clap. The dark fire sword made by the famous craftsman of Luquan Commandery is really a good sword. When the vital energy moves through the seal scripts and the blade, it can ignite a flame of such high temperature. But in this battle, Ding Ning, who was holding the remnant sword, performed better. Ku Shichuan's face was covered in a layer of frost. He knew that Su Hashan's words were directed at him. It was just a coincidence. He looked coldly at Su Hashan and said, "If there had not been such a trap, the one to admit defeat would have been Ding Ning." Su Hashan stopped clapping and retorted, "Being able to use everything in the surroundings is also a kind of ability." Gu Shichuan said expressionlessly, "It is a pity that in most battles between cultivators, there is no room for such tricks." This was the case on the battlefield, the battles in the streets, and even the competitions in the Min Mountain Sword Trials did not have any tricks. Compared to these little tricks, I believe in absolute strength more. Su Hashan was not a person skilled in debate. Ku Shichuan's words angered him, but he could not think of a rebuttal. So he sank into silence with a dark expression. At the side, Xie Chongsheng, who had been very active, sank into silence. Xiero's words about not being able to defeat even one of Li Lingjuan's retainers had provoked him greatly. And Ding Ning's performance caused him to lose any mood to play. He is very outstanding, but what kind of lousy sword does he have? It is so far from the other's sword. He was silent for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Does White Goat Cave not even have the money to buy a good sword?" Hearing his words, Xie Ro shook her head. Since the teachers of White Goat Cave gave him a sword like this, they naturally have their intentions. Also, do not appear so wastrel every time you speak. It is all about money, money, money. Those who know how to spend money are not true wastrels. Those who know how to spend money but cannot cultivate well are true wastrels. There was no smile on Xie Chongsheng's face. He seemed to be answering Xie Ro, but also speaking to himself. Chapter 66. A mid-ranking disciple had been defeated by Ding Ning. For Duanmu Lian, this was not a happy matter. But at this time, Duanmu Lian's expression softened slightly. Ding Ning's performance was outstanding, but his cultivation was limited. Even his body was clearly weaker than the disciples of White Goat Cave and Green Vine Sword Academy. While he had grasped the opportunity to defeat Yu Lian, an opponent of Yu Lian's level should be his limit. Among the remaining disciples of the Green Vine Sword Academy, there were at least a dozen stronger than Yu Lian. So, regardless of the final result, this wine shop youth would not be able to win in the end. Looking at Ding Ning, who hung the wooden token at his waist and continued to move forward, he took out a green flag at the edge of the viewing platform and waved it towards the valley. As he waved the green flag in his hand, waves of smoke slowly floated out of the sword trial valley. They grew thicker until they formed 4 pillars of smoke that shot into the sky. Ding Ning first sensed the smoke in the wind, and then he immediately saw the 4 pillars of smoke. His brow slowly furrowed. The area marked by the 4 pillars of smoke was about a third of the total length of the valley. Based on the schedule of 3 days to complete this valley, this mark was reasonable. Yet, according to the rules of this sword trial festival, he had to enter the area marked by the 4 pillars of smoke at noon every day. Otherwise, it would be considered a failure. But the second and third day could start in the middle of the night. Today, when he reached the bottom of the valley, it was close to noon. So he had to rush on the first day. Rushing would use up more energy and be even more disadvantageous for him. He calculated the time and estimated that he would have to jog to reach the destination. It was also at this moment that he felt a strange movement in his perception. He, who had been preparing to speed up, suddenly stopped and quickly turned around. The moment he turned around, before most of the people on the viewing platform could react, a black shadow the size of a wolf abruptly rushed out from the bottom of the vine wall behind him. It was just a bounce. Feeling the power of the other's jump, Ding Ning planted his feet on the ground and leaned back slightly. Physical energy surged out of his body and flooded into the remnant sword in his hand. Pure white flowers bloomed on the remnant sword and sprayed upwards. It immediately cut into the abdomen of the black shadow and flicked the black shadow over his head. Not a single drop of blood was spilled. There was only a line of bright sparks that continuously lit up at the place where the blade had cut. What is that? Most of the students on the viewing platform saw this black shadow from other places and looked at each other. These black shadows appeared after the 4 smoke beacons. It gave them the feeling that many cages containing these creatures had opened at the same time and released them as the smoke beacons ignited. Pa! The black shadow fell heavily to the ground and created a spray of dust and fallen leaves. Most people on the viewing platform still did not see what this thing was. But Ding Ning could not help but frown and say softly to himself, "So it is you thinking of eating your flesh. I feel somewhat disgusted." The dust and fallen leaves scattered. Many students on the viewing platform finally saw clearly and exclaimed in unison. Lying in the pit, staring at Ding Ning with bloodshot eyes, was a giant black lizard. There were many giant lizards in the mountains, but none of them had scales as hard as this one. The scales on the giant lizard in front of Ding Ning looked like black iron. Each piece was as thick as 2 or 3 copper coins. It looked like it was wearing a special layer of armor. So this was the armored lizard unique to the Ba Mountains. In the Ba Mountains, this armored lizard had another name, the corrosive poison lizard. This kind of lizard could eat any rotten food. Its saliva and gastric juices were filled with all kinds of powerful toxins. Ding Ning was confident he could kill a giant lizard like this. But when he thought about how he would waste a lot of time and be very tired to eat something like this as food, he could not feel happy. He Xiaoxi. Multiple exclamations sounded from the viewing platform. Coincidentally, several hundred feet away from Ding Ning, a giant lizard like this had appeared in front of He Xiaoxi, whom many people from the Green Vine Sword Academy had been following. This is an armored lizard. Su Hashan turned to look at Xie Changsheng and said gravely from the viewing platform. It looks like energy refinement realm cultivators cannot cut through its scales unless it is an especially sharp sword. Xia Chongqing frowned and said, "There are scales on its eyelids. It seems its open mouth is its weakness. If you really want to do this, you are finished." Su Heshan shook his head and said, "Its teeth are much harder than its scales, and its biting speed is faster than any other part of its body. Moreover, its biting strength is even more astonishing than the strength of its four limbs. Even if you can stab its throat, it can still bite your sword. Many swordsmen who do not understand it think its open mouth is its weakness and are killed by it." Xia Chongqing's heart turned cold. He could imagine if a cultivator like him lost the sword in his hand and then faced this armored lizard, just how miserable the outcome would be. "I hope brother-in-law will not be like me and want to stab its throat," he said sincerely. As he spoke, He Zhaoxi, the publicly recognized first student of the Green Vine Sword Academy, expressionlessly continued to walk forward as though there was nothing in front of him and such a vicious beast did not exist. The armored lizard in front of him seemed to sense his disdain and gave off a strange roar. It jumped up like the armored lizard that had attacked Ding Ning. The pupils of many people on the viewing platform contracted. A layer of blue light suddenly appeared on He Zhaoxi's skin. Every muscle under his skin seemed to be moving, condensing a terrifying power. The ground under his feet silently caved in, and he leaped up. His figure instantly appeared above the armored lizard's head. He pulled out the long sword on his back and slashed down. His long sword was a peculiar yellowish color, completely resembling a yellowish wooden sword. Yet, when the sword landed on the armored lizard's head, it was like an enormous mountain was falling down. Everyone could see a ring-shaped ball of air explode above the armored lizard's head. Then the armored lizard landed on the ground, burrowing several feet into the ground and creating a ring-shaped wave of energy. Xia Chongqing's eyebrows jumped and the corners of his mouth twitched. This was a brute force response without any fancy tricks. He could imagine the power of this sword strike. Even if this armored lizard didn't die, its head would have been shaken into a ball of paste. He Zhaoxi was too strong. At the same time, the armored lizard facing off against Ding Ning moved. A wild wind suddenly rose from the ground. The fallen leaves parted like waves. The armored lizard's abdomen was close to the ground, but its limbs moved at an astounding frequency. Its entire body was like a black blade sliding rapidly against the ground. 3 inches from the ground was always a dangerous place for cultivators. It was much harder to bend down and deal with attacks from the ground than to stand straight. Also, Ding Ning's sword was much shorter than other people's. Xiao's breathing suddenly stopped, because at this time, Ding Ning had already attacked. He bent down, and his sword was clearly heading towards the armored lizard's mouth. She didn't even dare to look at the following scene. But in the next moment, her eyes widened, and she gave an involuntary exclamation of surprise. Ding Ning's sword did not pierce the armored lizard's throat. His sword just brushed past the lizard's mouth. A section of its bloody tongue fell down. The armored lizard seemed to be calm, but it was as if someone had hit its nose with a giant hammer. Its body suddenly stiffened, and it couldn't help but shrink back. Blood mixed with smelly saliva flowed out of its mouth. Su Heshan and Xia Chongqing's gazes had just turned to this side, and their minds had just flashed with thoughts of how Ding Ning should deal with this when such a scene stunned them again. This was something they had never thought of. Ding Ning had cut off the armored lizard's tongue with one blow. Even Li Daoji was stunned. He had not expected Ding Ning to attack like this. Under many people's shocked gazes, Ding Ning's remnant sword suddenly stopped in the air and shook violently. This action was very much like using a flat ruler to swat a fly that had stopped on the window paper. With this violent shake, many small beads of blood and pure white flowers flew off the sword. The small beads of blood came from the armored lizard's severed tongue. The pure white flowers came from the reaction between his physical energy and the seal scripts on the sword. These small beads of blood and pure white flowers sprayed towards the armored lizard's eyes. The armored lizard instinctively closed its eyes. But Ding Ning's sword was too close to its eyes. Before it closed its eyes, Many small beads of blood and pure white flowers had already sprayed onto its weak eyes. More fine beads of blood seeped out of its eyes. It howled, and its front limbs started to swipe forward at astounding speed. Ding Ning took a deep breath. Small and pure white flowers bloomed on the inky green remnant sword in his hand. Using his fastest speed, he swung his sword downwards and slashed it down. A sword to the left, a sword to the right. With an extremely fast frequency and rhythm, his sword continuously slashed at the same spot on the left and right neck of this armored lizard. The armored lizard's eyes could not see clearly. Its claws kept on swiping, but it was always a beat too slow. When its left neck was swiped to the left, the sword light had already landed on its right neck. When it swiped to the right, the sword light had already landed on its left neck. Under Ding Ning's continuous attacks, the scales on the two sides of its neck finally cracked and blood started to flow. Waves of sharp inhales sounded on the viewing platform. The people who had been focused on He Xiaoxi turned to Ding Ning because of the strange inhales. Seeing Ding Ning's current state, they could not help but shake. The killing at this time has no beauty or skill to speak of. It's just like chopping wood. Su Heshan's face was pale. He took a deep breath and slowly said, "But who would have thought that such an armored lizard would be chopped down like a piece of wood?" On the other side, He Xiaoxi had killed the armored lizard with one blow. Now, he had started to take the flesh from the dead armored lizard. Compared to He Xiaoxi, Ding Ning appeared very weak. But the weaker he appeared, the more astounding the scene was. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.